Montpelier-Roxbury Board of School Directors. Let's start with important business first. Last update, 2-1 Montpelier. Just a few minutes left. Hopefully we'll hear ecstatic cheering outside in just a matter of
And field
minutes.
hockey
Oh,
has,
field hockey
field
too?
hockey is moving on.
Nice.
Finals.
To the finals.
Finals.
Yes. That's also worth noting. Our cross-country team came in 2 points behind U32 for second place in states.
Awesome.
And our girls soccer lost in penalty kicks last night.
That was brutal. Good game though. Really, really well fought.
So public comment, let's start with anyone in the room first, if you want to come up.
My name is Lisa Burns. I have had students in the system since 2012. And I am here to urge all the school board members to vote no to track funding. I feel there's been a lot of discussion about where the money comes from and that sort of thing. Any way you look at it, we have a large fund balance that can be spent. It can be spent one time. Each dollar can only be spent once. And I believe that spending $2 million, and actually since the time you got your bid, building prices have gone up 14%, so we can just add another $300,000 so far. Spending that kind of money at this point in time is absolutely tone deaf to what's happening in our country with regard to education. And I think our students deserve as much funding and time and materials and effort that anyone else does to make up for this educational loss that happened because of COVID. And no one, I assume that there's no one in this room who would deny that we have had horrible educational loss. So we have this block of money and it can be spent once. So anyone who says, this isn't an either-or decision, you can have both. Either thinks they are speaking to a fool, or they are a fool themselves, or they just love that branding idea where you say what you want to be, I want to be everything, and then it doesn't matter. So it would be my hope that this money could be spent to help with what we've already very successfully done with $3 million worth of ESSER funds. We have used them effectively, but they are obviously not even close to enough for what we need to do. Ms. Bonesteel is going to give us a talk about what we've done with it, kitchens, little gyms, interventionists, but it's not even close to enough for what our kids deserve and need. And given a choice of a track for $2 million or $2 million to fund education, I would ask you to do the right thing. That's it.
I'm Jacob Nunnally. I'm a kid at Main Street Middle School, and I think that track is really important for the middle schoolers and the high schoolers that compete on it. And I think that overall it's less maintenance for the people, because like last year when I did track and field, it took like an entire practice and a half to do it, and we didn't really get to practice before the meet. And also I think that it prevents injury, because last year there was a lot of skin knees and like rocks in knees, and it was kind of horrible, but I think we can fix that. Also, I think it's important because track and field would be more fun, and track costs less money, and like you can choose what you want to do, and I think not a lot of sports do that, except for like these. And also it's I guess like the coaches work really hard to keep us like in shape, and if you've seen any other track from a school, you would know that ours is nothing compared to any other track. And I think we just need to realize that.
So I'm Catherine Nunnally. I'm Jacob's mom, and I've been in education for over 20 years as a teacher and, of course, a parent, and now as a staff person here. And I just want to reiterate what Jacob said, and he came up with that pretty much all by himself, that what we need now is more than anything is community building, and track is one way that that can definitely be done. And just from his, mental health and physical health, from all the things that we've lost with COVID, track and field and cross country have been a great way to improve all of that. And I just also want to reiterate that the coaches are excellent, and I think our facility should equal that excellence. And it is a sport that over 20% of the middle school participates in. It's a very inclusive sport, and I would like for the school board to support the new track. Thank you.
Hey folks, Jim Eikenberry. You've seen me before. I support the track. Just gonna hit some highlights real quick, then make time, because I appreciate you all making the time after a long work day. I was over 200 miles of driving today in most of the northwest part of the state, so we'll keep it moving here. So just reiterating what Jacob said, and really here in support of my son Simon and his classmates. And I want to just talk about what I think track actually means and why the infrastructure makes sense. The current track has been neglected for decades, and that's not in keeping with how we maintain our school district. I think the report from Andrew last school meeting was really clear that we are proactive, we are thoughtful about infrastructure, we maintain what we have, and we try to make it better. And that hasn't happened on the track facilities. The love and care that the athletic fields get is not what the track has received. Parents, myself included, have spent untold hours picking grass out of the high jump and long jump, trying to straighten bars and make lanes not be wet or icy, painting lines, for each track meet, measuring it. Untold hours of volunteer time, because we love our kids and we love the sport and we love what it gives them for their mental health and their physical health and their emotional well-being and their community building. And I don't think other folks are mowing the lawns as parents or setting up all the goalposts as parents and breaking down afterwards. It's, we've given a lot, and we'd like to see some of our tax resources go towards improving the facility so that it is safe and that it is excellent and, just something that can be used. I think it's an inclusive sport. I also think that it's not going to just benefit a few. I believe that not only will the track team use it, the cross-country team, I think you're going to find other teams using it once it's a better, safer facility. Gym classes, it's not unusual to take a lap around the track, stretch, then do something. So community members, even the current dirt track, after we have a meet, people show up and start walking around it, which I find shocking because it's not a great facility at this point. So we're going to find so many people that are in the school district, our community members, engage with this safe facility. So I think it will be many people benefiting, not a few. Big picture, I think that the track becomes a catalyst for the behavior that we want to see in our schools and in our community. It supports anti-bullying behavior. It supports inclusive behavior. It supports really just welcoming anyone based, regardless of their gender, neurodiversity, ability level. Track is just a big, warm, inclusive hug of a sport. And that's rare. And I'll say again what I shared a quote from somebody the other day. Where else will you see an 8th grader cheering on a 5th grader? And that carries on in high school. And it's not just folks who can run, it's people who want to jump, people who want to throw, people who just want to be with their friends in a safe location after school, doing things that we as parents and community members would be happy them doing instead of other things that they could be doing. So it's not just an infrastructure investment. It's a community investment. It's a social infrastructure investment. It's going to lead to positive things that we want, that have benefits that are beyond just what they're going to get from an educational standpoint, but teaching them to be better people, better citizens. And it's rare when you could make an infrastructure change and have that kind of positive change. And I think this is one of those situations. And I strongly urge all board members to please vote to take the $400,000 of currently available unallocated funds and set them aside to make the track project happen. We're most of the way there. Let's get all the way there and let's make it happen. Thank you.
Boys won.
Yay!
Second, can I get a sense of how many people we have both in the room and on the on Zoom who want to speak? 1, 2, 3, and how many people? Could you do one? Is there anyone who can? Is there anyone else who wants to speak besides? Sorry, my eyes are not as good as they used to be. Giovanna.
Few people come here to speak.
Huh?
Not everyone here is going to speak. Like, more people are coming to speak.
Okay, more people are coming. Here they come. If you could try to limit your comments to 1 minute, just so we can be respectful of time, be concise, that would be appreciated. So continue with the room.
Good evening, school board. My name is Nathan Suter. I am a parent. I am a resident of town. Both of my students participated in track and field in middle school, and I'm also the head coach of the middle school track and field team. This past spring, we had 79 student athletes participating on the track team. That's 20% of the entire enrollment at the middle school, which I'm super proud about. I contact the principal of the middle school and other school social worker and guidance counselor every year before the season starts, asking them to send to the track team because it's a great inclusive environment. And I think that we get some students that way. We certainly get new faces every year. That's one of the things I love about the sport. Jim mentioned the positive culture. 8th graders cheering on 5th graders, and then to Lisa's comment about sort of community and learning loss, my understanding is that one of the greatest deficits and one of the things we most need in the community and in the student body is connection and community and rebuilding those ties that we weakened during COVID by being remote and being away from each other. Track and field is multi-gender, it is multi-age. As Jacob said eloquently, you can choose different activities. So you can throw something heavy, you can run fast, you can jump high. Again, super inclusive. A couple years ago, because we borrow equipment for our track meets, we borrow 60 hurdles from Spalding High School, which we bring on a trailer. We borrow high jump mats and high jump standards from Northfield, which we bring on a trailer. We were at a meet and one of the other coaches came up and said, I can't let my athletes do the high jump because you don't have a cover over the pits. And if they fall through the crack between the two high jump pits, they could be injured and I can't let them do that. I hadn't thought this through. I called a parent, they ran to Ace Hardware, or to Aubuchon Hardware, bought a gigantic blue tarp, brought it to the track meet, we covered the pits, made it safer, and continued with the track meet. I was fine to respond to that. We're good with duct tape and chewing gum, but it would be wonderful to move beyond duct tape and chewing gum and into a modern facility that we can own for the next 20 years. In terms of the idea of opportunity cost, which of course any money spent by the school district is an opportunity cost, my understanding is that the administration has been extraordinarily proactive about finding where to use funds, whether they be ESSER funds or regular taxpayer dollars, to meet the needs of students with learning differences or students that I call the sort of the middle who don't qualify for an IEP or a 504 but still need extra services. My understanding is that we are advancing in those initiatives as well, which I would agree, that's the highest priority. This, to me, is different. It's not an annual ongoing operating cost. This is a one-time capital improvement, just like getting air conditioners or just like repairing a roof. And I would humbly submit that it's probably past time for the track to be updated, given the condition that it's in. I also understand the wish to continue to do public engagement and get input on this project. I hope that we can, as a school board and as a district, get to yes on this project and then move on. I know that you have a annual budget to consider and other significant projects to consider, so I think there's some value to just moving on. Yeah, okay, more than a minute. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your work.
They actually had a timer, and I could just set like 90 seconds on my phone,
Do you wanna
and
do that?
when it goes off, you're done.
Okay,
Okay,
good.
I'll do that.
Next, please. Oh,
Hi, I'm Ezra. I'm one of the team captains for cross country and track and field. I've been doing it since middle school, since 6th grade. And I've really enjoyed Nathan's track program in 7th grade. We went to the U32's track, and that was kind of like the first, I think, like big school-wide sports, because I think girls at the time didn't really have a lot of sports. You know, there was baseball and not a whole lot of inclusion there, but track was really like bringing people together, which is cool. And again, using U32's track is great, but why can't we have one here? We're Montpelier, we're the capital. It kind of seems like we should have this facility. And yeah, I just wanted to advocate that. Thanks.
Oh yeah, sorry. Hey, I'll be quick. Tim Duggan, I'm a parent. My son's on the middle school track team, cross country, and is very fortunate to work with Nathan and the other folks in that program. I just sort of learned about that this was a project that was advancing quickly, and I share some of the concerns that my friend Lisa mentioned earlier, but what I guess I'm most concerned about is not seeing a process that sort of really kind of took a hard look at different options. I think the board and the administration generally does a really good job of being proactive and thoughtful, but if there is a $2 million pot of money that's unrestricted that could be used for transformational purpose, I think it would behoove everyone to just take a quick look at a couple of core areas like learning loss, like special education needs, and other sort of areas that don't have as ready and sort of interest group to advance it. But there's a lot of core infrastructure needs, I think, that could be advanced. And so I just urge the board to take a brief minute to consider those things and have a thumbnail sketch maybe of what does $2 million buy me in these areas, and present it and then have a vote. I spent way too much time trying to figure this out over the past couple of weeks once I learned it was moving so quick. And so I think it would be a good process. I think you could all be proud of the result. But mostly I just want to thank you for your time, thank you for your work, and appreciate the opportunity to comment.
Thank you, Tim.
Avery?
Hi, my name is Avery. I'm the team captain for the Montpelier boys cross country team and track team. I only started running as a freshman with the team, but I think it's changed me a ton as an individual. I think it's changed the path of my life. I'm actually going to be running in college, and that really helped with like admission. So that kind of is a long-term effect of running. I found a group of boys who are super, super awesome, and they hold me to be a better person every day, and I think we hold each other. They, a lot of Montpelier boys and even U32 boys, and it's part of the beauty of running. Because we don't have as good of a track, the Montpelier boys went up to U32 and did a workout with them yesterday on their track because they have one. And I think that we're the state capital. We could host the state meet. We could bring more people here. And I think that it would be a really great opportunity to improve the school. And again, it's a one-time kind of infrastructure. And it seems like a really great opportunity to improve just athletics and increase turnout of kids.
Just so the person taking minutes can get it. I know who you are, but she
Oh
might.
yeah, Avery Smart.
Yeah, there you go.
Thank you, Avery.
Hey guys, my name is Noah Rivera, and unlike Avery and Ezra back there, this is my first year at Montpelier High School. I actually transferred here from Harwood last year. And this is a wonderful school, but one of the big things that made me transfer was the friendships I built with these guys, and I built that over the track season. Every meet I would go to, I would see the Montpelier team, and they had such a great energy, and they always made me smile and included me like I was one of them, and it was great. And you just really don't see that anywhere but track. I mean, look at this. We have the entire U32 team who's supposed to be our rivals. They're here to support the track for Montpelier. And I think that just speaks volumes about the community of the track team and the importance to all of us on the track team. So it would be really meaningful to have the appreciation and to be able to have the track. And I think that could bring a lot of new people into this wonderful community. And I think that would be a great thing. Thank you.
Others? Great, thank you everyone. And on Zoom, I know Giovanna wanted to speak. Please go ahead.
Good evening. I'm Giovanna.
We can't hear you.
We can't hear her, but she's not
It
muted.
doesn't look like you're muted, but it might be something audio on your end.
I'm unmuted.
Could be our
Or it could be our end too. Oh, do we have the sound on?
I'm
Apologies,
unmuted.
give us a second.
Give us a minute, Giovanna, sorry about this.
Apologies, sorry about the technical difficulties.
Giovanna, you're not using headphones, are you?
I am not.
You have headphones in?
No.
I think that's for us.
We could test and have the next person unmute just to see if their volume is working, to
Yeah,
make sure
good
that
idea.
it's on her.
Heather's on, and she says it's definitely our end because
Okay.
Heather can hear her just fine.
Aha, thank you,
Okay.
Heather. Thanks for the.
Have she tried to speak again?
Giovanna, can you try again? Yeah, can you hear me now at all?
Yeah.
No,
Can we get it through a computer?
It'd have to be his computer, I think.
I could call in.
That speaker icon at the top next to the Wi-Fi icon, is that how it should look? Or should
I
it
don't
have
know.
something else on it? You just call it.
Yeah,
I'm already
I
on
think
it.
it's a good
can't.
suggestion.
It's through their,
To what?
their computer.
Yeah. No.
We've got all these teenagers in the room. I feel like
One of them should be able to figure this out.
Something just happened. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now, yes.
Hey, I heard something pop.
Etiquette.
Thank you, Annika.
I'm Giovanna Peebles, and we live in Montpelier, and we raise kids at Montpelier, K through 12. And I am certainly not against the track, but there's so many needs, education related, as Lisa and the other gentleman mentioned, that I think I'm representing a lot of Montpelier residents who are not here tonight. And we're seeing this on Front Porch Forum, a lot of concern and a lot of confusion about what the costs are involved. I think everyone supports the track, but I don't think that process is being supported. An expense of this magnitude should go to the entire community via public vote in March. This will increase our tax rate, and I'll just end by saying it requires a public vote and a lot more community understanding, so you don't get a terrible backlash. Everyone wants to support our kids, and we just want to do it right, as Lisa and the other gentleman whose name I missed stated. So kids there, we want to support your track, but I think we need more work, and it needs a public vote. And thank you so much for your time. Thank you for all your work.
Anna.
Thank you. Thanks for sticking with us through the technical
Yes,
difficulties.
apologies for that. Do we have anyone else on Zoom who wants to speak? Is there anyone with a hand up? No? All right, well, thank you, everyone. We appreciate the public comment, as always. Next order of business is consent agenda.
I just have a quick
Whoever.
question about the agenda, if
Yes.
that's okay. I also just I feel like sometimes when we have a lot of public at a meeting, just nice to like really honor the fact that you all came to speak
Yes.
to us. So I don't know what your schedules are like tonight and if you have to leave, but I just want to give a heartfelt thank you to everybody who came to speak, because our work as a board is greatly improved by community input. So it's been really helpful for me to hear from the community on both sides on this topic.
Absolutely.
And I'm wondering if, we might be able to move the discussion on the agenda up a little bit. I know we have a presentation and committee report, but it does seem like there's people that might want to stay for this, and it feels uncomfortable for me to make them wait that long for that part of the discussion.
Can I just disagree with that? Because I think it would be really helpful for me to look at this data presentation as back data to inform the way that I'm thinking about the track decision. So, because I think it's the big picture, one of the pieces of the big picture that I'm asking. So to move that conversation, it feels to me like it's gonna miss a piece of info that I need.
Okay.
Do others have thoughts?
I agree with them.
I think that people need that presentation to make their decision, then
Yeah,
we should keep it the way it is.
One of us feels that way, and no one else has other strong feelings. Let's go with the agenda as proposed. And again, thank you, everyone. I definitely appreciate it. And if you can stick with us, please do. And if not, we totally understand. Also, we are on Zoom if you, yeah. Do we have more seats?
Yeah, they go here, they can figure it out.
Huh?
There are some.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Over here. Yeah, if anybody wants to have a seat.
Yeah, and also, I think we're not done with those chairs. There are a few chairs here, and there's a few benches, so if you guys want to, when you're teenagers, so you can sit on the floor too. It doesn't break you like it does those older folks.
And it is on the agenda for 7:30.
Yes.
So that's a half an hour from now.
Maybe.
That's looking a little aspirational. And I do want to just also, a quick, we have several policy readings. If we are feeling that we are running on fumes at that point, I think some or all of those could be pushed to a different meeting.
Yeah.
Good to know.
Yeah. So consent agenda, do I have a motion to approve a consent agenda?
I'll move that we approve the consent agenda.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
I just
Yes.
wanted to, this wasn't exactly in your superintendent report, Libby, but I thought I'd take advantage of the fact that we have a bigger audience than we normally do and put in a plug for our district blog and podcast, especially the most recent episode with Jess Murray and Adriana and Kale, two of our students. The topic is restorative practices in our schools, and I will say Adriana and Kale were honest in a way that only kids can be, and it was an incredibly informative listen for me. So I just wanted to encourage everybody who's listening to subscribe to the In the Schools podcast and definitely listen to the most recent episode, number 13, I think it is.
Excellent, thank you. No, and that's a great plug because there's a lot of really good information.
And blog, new blog.
And the blog.
The
You're
next
right.
post is coming
And the
out
blog.
soon, and I am out in Roxbury, and Danny Velez is through fourth class.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah, so there's definitely a lot to be learned on those. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, thank you. So we are only 15 minutes behind schedule now. Paul, academic data.
Amanda, I'm going to I know you're on the Zoom. Can you, I just shared the presentation with you every time. The only time I share my screen is during a school board meeting, and I forget that I have to fix the Zoom. Something's wrong with my computer and Zoom and sharing the screen, but I just shared it with you. Can you pull it up? I'm sorry.
I think she might need to be a
Oh,
is she a
I need
host?
to,
Or does she not need to be a host to share her screen?
yeah.
Oh, no, hold on. Okay, I just changed it. All participants can I also shared it with Heather. Heather, if you could share your screen too. Or Heather, one of the two. Thank you. I'm sorry, Amanda. Go over to slideshow.
Upper right.
Upper
Next to the
right.
yellow button.
All right. Yep, I will. Okay, so this is from our fall data snapshot. Mike Berry apologizes for not being here today. It is his anniversary, and so he was told he had to do that instead, which is understandable. So I am going to step in for Mike today. So getting into our academic data, we also have Peggy, Sue, and Jess here who are going to talk about SEL and special education data. Academics is up first. He's got some nice color coding. Mike created these slides for us tonight. Just a reminder to the board that when we're talking about academic data, we're talking about 4 areas of data. There's state and national data. The state data was up until this school year, SBAC, and the new science, or the science exam. The state has decided to go away from SBAC, so we have something new. I cannot answer any questions about it because I have not been getting any information about it except that it's called Cognia and we will be doing it in the spring. So that is all I know about it. The national data is, of course, the NAEP. That will still be in place. The benchmark screening data is another form that we do. We actually do this K through 12 for our screening data, and it's important to keep in mind what screeners do. Screeners are not necessarily what we want our teachers using to pinpoint instructional moves because that's not the purpose of them. It's too broad. Our screener is done on a computer, so it is a test. So just thinking about that, passages are short. They're more basic in the level of rigor that's being asked. It is tied to the Common Core, but they're a different type of assessment than our diagnostics, which are next. So Diagnostic data does give us information about what we can do with our readers and mathematicians immediately, like the next day. And oftentimes when the screening data comes in and it shows a kid is scoring lower on the screener, then we'd often go into more robust diagnostics to get more of a sense of what exactly the kiddo needs for skills and strategy work. And then we have our local data that's teacher created. They're created usually in professional learning committees and communities, with teacher teams around unit assessments, formative assessments. That is a subjective created or teacher created measure. So just thinking about these forms of data is important when we're talking about data. So you can go ahead, Amanda. Sorry, interrupting your note taking up there. Yeah, click it all the way through. So when we're thinking about data, we collect it from these multiple measures. I know that's really small. Mike has a thing for very small text on a screen. I apologize for that. Then we analyze it both at the district level, we analyze it at the administrative level, we analyze it at the teacher level. We respond to what it's saying, and then we monitor what's happening. And this presentation will, of course, be part of the board packet, so I won't read you all those pieces in there, and the board has a copy of it. But it explains in each of those areas what that looks like in each school. So you can keep going, Amanda. So for our state and national data, he's continuing with this color coding here. SBAC, in terms of, we are going to show you some SBAC school-wide data, but it's technically still embargoed. Families will be receiving, if they haven't already, their individual child's report that we can send out, but technically the scores are embargoed for any kind of disaggregating the data or anything like that. But we do have, because they're available on the individual child report, how the school did. Like, we thought if that's on the individual child report, then that must not be embargoed information anymore. So we will be showing you that tonight. The benchmark screening data is from our Renaissance Star results. You can see from the district-wide level, the results from the fall scores there. The green is at or above benchmark. The blue there is on watch. That is Renaissance Star language, not MRPS language. Necessarily, the yellow they would be saying is in need of intervention, and the urgent intervention is the red. We have a different definition, perhaps, of what that means than Renaissance Star, but it's important to note that that's their language. And then our diagnostic data, you can just see a sample of what's in our data dashboard here for students. It's what it looks like at the teacher level and at the administration level. So we'll look at these scores and see where kids are in our data days, and teachers and PLCs are looking at all the time. And then our local data. So we have, for instance, this is just a sample from math skills. It informs both at the individual student level and the whole class level. And in this particular example, it was from 8th grade. We were able to easily see that the skills of multiplying mixed numbers, dividing decimals, prime factorizations, multiply and divide by integers were all areas of need for the classes, informing our first instructional strategies. So that's just a snapshot of what we're looking at.
I just have a clarifying question. In the yellow rectangle,
Yeah.
is that one student or is that a
Oh,
class?
no, that's a class.
That's a class.
Or that's a
And
snippet of a class.
Also in the blue is a class?
Yeah.
Or one student?
Yeah,
Okay.
no, that's not one student. So each of the rows would be a different student.
Oh, okay.
And
the blue?
that's just a snippet. It's just a screenshot of it. It's not a whole entire class, but yeah.
Right,
It's a
okay.
snippet. We just wanted to show you what it looks like from our end when we're looking at the data.
Yeah, that's helpful.
So if we move on, this is some of our SBAC information at the elementary school. So we have both UES and RVS. Our SBAC, they start taking the SBAC at grade 3. This is for last year's score reports. It's hard to look now at trends from SBAC because of the pandemic. It wasn't taken one year. Last year was very optional, and we had many students who opted out of it 2 years ago, sorry. And this past year, students did take it. These are how our scores were slightly above the state average for both of our schools, with the exception of 4th grade math, and at RVS, which is slightly below it.
Can Can you just say a little bit more about what that number means?
It's a scaled score, so, you'd ask me that. It's a range. So when we're looking at, and you'll see when you get your kiddo's individual score, when you get mile scores. So the range of a 1 is this range of scaled scores, and then there's a scaled scores of 2, and then there's a range of 3. And so students score within those ranges, and you'll be able to see, are they a high 3, or are they just barely make it into that 3 proficiency? So it's basically how they score it in a very highfalutin scoring mentality, which is really hard to pinpoint and explain away because the scaled score doesn't stay the same each year. It depends on the kids taking the tests and it's a very detailed number for how the state gets that. The state assigns that, we don't.
And the most important thing here is where are we compared to the rest of the state? Is that the way to think about this? How are we doing?
The state, so it's the state average. So if you'd like to compare it to the state average, you can. This is saying that we are proficient essentially in these. If you looked at the scaled scores, this is what's embargoed still. You would see that, Union Elementary School for grade 3 ELA is proficient. Has this many kids proficient. That's what we can't show you, the percentage, the actual percentage.
Okay.
Does that make sense? It's
sort of.
It's the state more than us right now at this part.
I think Emma has a question.
Do we have access to the national scale score? Could we compare ourselves against the national average?
Not everybody takes the SBAC.
Not every state.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's a consortium, and I can't remember how many states actually use the SBAC. So I imagine we would be able to find that number somewhere. It's got to be out there, right? I would imagine.
To have that number in here as just a point of reference.
It is not something that the state gives us. We'd have to go search for it.
Go and research it, yep.
Yeah.
But, and I think I'll ask the questions at the end.
You okay?
Yeah, I guess my question is around, can we compare ourselves? How are girls versus boys doing?
That's what's embargoed right now. Yes.
Okay.
We can do it internally, but they haven't told us we can do it publicly yet.
Okay.
Amanda, if you want to keep going. So this is our, sorry, I just slipped my own slide. This is our MSMS information. Less bars, of course, because we have only one school there. So it's just MSMS compared to the rest of the state. We're above the state average in each area. Again, I'd love to be able to show you what the actual proficiency level is and the percent of kids who are proficient. That's what's embargoed. So it's generalized knowledge, I guess. And then here's MHS. They take it in 9th grade, ELA and math. So pretty much across the board, we scored very similarly, just slightly above the state average in ELA and math. This is the Renaissance Star reading. Oh, thanks, Amanda, for keep going. So when you're looking at this, you can see the first bar there. Well, maybe you can't because it's so small. The first bar is Main Street Middle School. So according to our screener data, so keeping in mind this is the screener data, not diagnostic data. So this isn't data that the teacher's going to use the next day, but this is an overall looking at programmatic and giving us some idea of who we really need to target immediately. So Main Street Middle School in reading scored 7 in the fall, which was early October for when they took it, scored 72% at or above proficiency. At Montpelier High School, that number is 60, something on my screen, sorry, 62%. At Roxbury Village School, 40%. And at Union Elementary School is 68%. We're at or above benchmark on the screener data. It's just really important to keep in mind what assessment we're looking at and what that does for us, what it tells us. This is really broad generalized information is what a screener tells us. The STAR math in the next slide. Similar results there. Main Street Middle School was 64%, Montpelier High School was 64%, Roxbury Village School was 48%, and Union Elementary School was 71, almost 72% at above benchmark on the screener in math. The Fontes and Pinnell is the diagnostic measure for our little guys. So you see right now, first grade, because our kindergartners don't actually take the Fontes and Pinnell in the fall, it's with actual text. So the child is reading a text to their teacher and answering comprehension questions about it. And so it's more diagnostic. A teacher could use the information immediately with a child. So Fontes and Pinnell is the company that we use, or the diagnostic that we use. And at Union Elementary School, 79% are proficient or higher in the diagnostic. So this gives us much more information about what kids are actually doing as readers. And at Roxbury Village School, 57% were proficient or higher on the Fontes and Pinnell. So, and remember, we're just talking in the fall, first graders through fourth graders, not kindergartners, or certainly pre-Ks. You can.
Do you also use the curriculum for Fontes and Pinnell?
No, we don't have.
Just
they have what's called the LLI kits, leveled learning. Totally blanking on. Thank you, leveled literacy intervention. Thank you, Peggy Sue. We do have those pieces. We use it as a resource for kids who are in need of, who are kind of tangled in reading. We do not use it cover to cover, like following every direction in it, because we are of the belief that we need to know the kid's targeted skill that the child needs and then match the resource to that skill, rather than saying you're going to do this whole program regardless of what skills you need. So we have a little different mentality than what the program does, but we do have that resource for our teachers.
I was just at a conference and there was a conversation around some of the racism that are embedded into some of those curriculums. So just to note around our curriculum and racial justice pieces of it.
In Tier 3, so if you keep going, Amanda, so the board will remember that our true focus within our 4 pillars is the timely systems for remediate, intervene, and enrich. And so we've had our first cycle go through. So this year we've really changed it up on our interventionists, and we've asked them to do very short, intentional, targeted cycles. This was the first time they've done it. They've never done it this way. And we're basically like, let's see what happens, right? So we had our first cycle and we had a lot of successes, and we're having a lot of places where we've got learning that we're pulling in and feedback from kids, results for kids. So some of our successes is that we have our universal skills named K through 12. So when a child is in need of remediation, it means they're pretty tangled. That's a universal skill we're talking about. So it's almost like a catch-up skill, for lack of a better term, usually around 2 grade levels behind what it typically is taught. So those universal skills are what we remediate in. The first cycle, or Tier 3, at Union, we had 56 students who qualified for that. RBS had 14, MSMS had 25, and MHS had 27. All of those, the first cycle was completed, and we have data about what happened during that cycle. We're using new data tools, so we're actively tracking targeted skills, the goals and the progress for each student. What's really cool is our kindergarten interventionist, Rachel, is like jumping like to the moon, because she used to be a kindergarten teacher, a very good one, and she's like, we've got all our kindergartners knowing their upper and lowercase letters now. Like, that's never happened. We could never make that statement in October. And it's through her work in the Tier 3. So it's super excited that we can say those kind of things now. We are tracking attendance information for students, and as with the intervention, and not surprisingly, kids who are showing up at a less time when they're in need of Tier 3 don't have the same success as kids who are there every day. So UES, for instance, had almost a 90% attendance rate for kids who were in this first cycle of Tier 3 instruction, and they had a lot of success in this tier. But that's connected to our learnings. Well, the other thing we're learning is that each of our different school buildings have different systems and structures and personnel, right? And so because of the structure here at MHS, for instance, where a student who went through this first cycle of remediation at UES got 15 sessions with an expert, at MHS, because of the schedule alone, they got 5 sessions. So it's a schedule thing. And then if a child was absent for one of those 5 sections, right, like it multiplies at a much greater rate. So that's one of our learnings, like how do we figure that out? So we're really digging into that level of detail right now. I know Jason was here or is here, there he is. We're having lots of conversations about what could that look like, so that kids who need this type of support, we're not hindered by a schedule. Like that shouldn't happen, right? So it was really interesting data for us to look at. We're continuing to work on making very targeted goals. So I took a brief glance over this screen right here, which is great that Amanda just pulled it up. And some of the goals that were written are really targeted and intentional, and we want that because each little small win is going to build that kid's confidence and that they can do the next one and the next one. Domino effect, right? And some of our goals just aren't targeted enough yet. So for instance, use illustrations to figure out the meaning of text. That's not targeted enough. And it's not going to move a reader forward who's tangled in reading. So we've learned that we still need some more work on forming those targeted goals.
So this here are examples of goals that have been set with kids.
Yep. And so this is an example, just a screenshot of a set of how we're collecting data. And so you can see what the goal statement was. You can see how goal 1 compared different forms of an expression. So it's a math goal from UES. And so that child, after, the first kind of formative assessment was at level 2 proficient. At the next formative assessment for that same goal, they were proficient. So they've mastered that goal, right? And you can see, looking at this entire spreadsheet, you can see some pretty big growth with kids. So it's cool that we have this. Amanda, because I know what your question's going to be, our systems, because they're new systems with VCAT and PowerSchool, they're not talking to each other yet. We're in process with the guy who makes VCAT. And so right now, we'd have to go in and hand key all demographic, gender, all that. We'd have to hand key it for every single student. And we just simply don't have the time to prioritize that right now. We can get the systems, we're working on getting the systems talking. So what I said to Mike was the next time we present this kind of information to the board, we'll be able to disaggregate it, right? And he said, sure, we will. So that's why you don't have disaggregated information right now. And it's another learning. We have to get that up and going, right? Hold on one second, Amanda. So doing this type of work is still a learning process for our educators and for our system. So we're still in this process of making sure that we're doing the right work with kids who are really tangled up. And I think we've made a lot of inroads already this year. Let me think other learnings that we've had. Oh, the other thing we've really learned is that students who come in who are new to our district, we have to figure out an onboarding process for them where we get assessment information right away for students. We had a significant increase in students at UES in particular who were coming in with a different level of knowledge than what our typical second grader has. And so we have to figure that out when we get a new child. What's that look like for the child in terms of not only building relationships with their classmates and their teachers and all that kind of stuff, which is super important, and also getting a very specific picture of their learning needs right away. So that's something that we've learned this year, or we're paying attention to this year. Okay, so Amanda, if you could go to the longitudinal screener data, that one, yeah. So this is a kind of cool screen. I took a snapshot. The link there with literacy is all of the grades. This is essentially the same cohort of kids for the screener data. Okay, so we're in the larger, broader, generalized screener data. So this is grade 4 right here, all of our grade 4s. It's grade 4 at UES and RBS. It's not split up by school. So in 2019-20, when this group first took the screener, they were at a 66% proficiency level as first graders. You can follow this same cohort of kids up to grade 4 in literacy, and at grade 4, they just took this assessment this fall. They're at 71% in the screener data. Now, keep in mind, like in 2019, 2020, what year we were in there, that was the year of potting. Yes, potting.
No, that's when the pandemic hit.
Yeah.
Or 2020, March 2020.
Oh, yes, that was the year
Auditing was 21 or 2021.
So we had a really low, like, they had 56 kids in that cohort. And now we have 82 kids in that cohort, right? So there's a significant change in the number of students who took this assessment. So it's not technically the exact same kids, but it is the cohort of kids following them across. So when the national media is talking about learning loss, this is one way we can track. Do we have that similar trend here, right? And so in 8th grade, you can see similar results and a similar number of kids. We went from 75 kids who took it in 1920 to 81 kids who just took it this past fall. And we were at 72% were proficient in 2019-20, and we moved to, we're at 69%, which is statistically valid within 5%, right? And so, so our children, according to our screener data, broad, generalized, programmatic measures are not showing significant learning loss here in our literacy data. And again, this is the same for all of our grades. You'll get the same results. There's one little snippet in one of the grades, and I can't remember which one it is, but that link, the literacy where it's linked there, you can see the cohorts in every grade. I just gave a screenshot here. Keep going, Amanda. Similar screen in math. So again, I showed the 4th and 8th grade. It's interesting, 66 kids took it in math in 1920. I'm not sure why less kids took it in reading. But you'll see a similar result here in math. 88% of those 66 kids were proficient in 2019-20. 74% were proficient in 22-23. A slight decrease, not a huge one, and a significantly more students took the assessment this past fall. And then for 8th grade, it was similar results. We had 67% were proficient in 19-20 and 67% were proficient in 22-23. So when we're thinking about longitudinal data through the pandemic, these are the types of things we can look at because SBAC was interrupted, diagnostics were interrupted, but the screeners stayed put. So this is one common measurement we can look at in our particular data, which is kind of cool, right? Any questions about the academics before we put Jess on the stage?
So why don't we get the
I had, these two can attest that I had that conversation. I said, we're going to be able to do that next time, right? Yep, sure.
Do you want us to hold our questions?
Well, I mean, so this is a lot of data. I mean, I remember last year we were looking at SBAC scores and we were all kind of like, or at least even you, we were just like, we're getting it, and here it is. So
we're getting closer.
It's
not
getting
quite
there.
Here yet, but we're getting closer.
Right. We're not there because this is a learning process. I imagine teachers are in the learning curve process, and there's a lot of excitement. How do you think that there are? There's a difference between being excited about the data and really knowing what to do with it, I guess. And so that is a second process. So how do you see that? Like last year, sort of getting data. This year, continuing to get data, learning to read it, but the conversation about what to do with it, essentially, because you're talking about this child needs these 3 things out of 50 maybe things that they should be at, and sort of how is the process of getting the team on board with sort of figuring out how to zero in, and you're saying that there's not time in the high school.
No, there is time.
But
you just have to figure out how to use
find the
the
time in the
yeah.
high school because of schedules, which makes sense because older kids have more things going on. It still really means, I mean, I know at RVS, there's wind block. And that is a new thing that allows kids to be sort of grouped in a lot of different ways. And there are certain kids that are getting really, really great opportunities there. And some kids that don't need that high level of sort of really specific instruction are actually going and helping younger kids, and they're reading to kids, and they're doing other kind of wonderful things too. So I guess,
It's what I need. So it's basically an intervention block that everyone, it was a non-negotiable. Every one of our schools have something like that. RVS calls it WIN. MSMS calls it the SST. I'm not sure. I think UAS might call it WIN too. We call it Soul and Block here at the high school.
It's owl time.
What is it?
Owl time.
Owl time.
so how's the learning curve with the using the data, I guess? How does that seem and sort of?
On a couple of levels, and it's really fascinating.
Yeah.
Right? So, so I was talking to Katie about this just yesterday. And I said, well, what, if you were going to write this slide, that tier 3 slide for the board, what would you put in it in terms of successes and learnings, right? And one of the things that she said to me was, we have more work to do on another pillar that I didn't expect. So another pillar we have is collective responsibility and collaborative responsibility and collective efficacy. And one of the things that we're learning is our UES interventions in particular are very good at targeting intentional skills. They actually could lead this work for the rest of the district. They're very good at that for the most part. And one of the things that's happening is that because we've switched how we're providing remedial services and being more intentional about it, no longer is a teacher able to say, hey, can you just come read with Johnny for a little bit? Which we had no evidence was working, and that was what was happening in the past. And so there's a little bit of a rub right now going on between generalized teachers in the classroom and interventionists in terms of we're collectively working to move children forward, which was interesting. She didn't expect that. And it's happening in more grades than the other. Another thing we're learning is that how do we use that data? How do we make those groups? How do we decide who's teaching what during WIN blocks or OWL time? So at the Guiding Coalition level, which is the teacher leadership team at UES, which has representation from each of the grade levels, K1 and 2 were very successfully looking at common formative assessment diagnostic data as a grade level and saying, I'll teach this group, I'll teach this group, I'll teach this group, I'll target these kids. 3 and 4 weren't doing that yet. And so in the Guiding Coalition, they talked about how K through 2 were doing that process, and 3 and 4, because there's a little peer pressure and competitiveness, not your wife at all, Nathan, not at all. We're like, wait, hold on, that's what's working right now? We'll go do that. We'll go talk to our team about that. So there's some, it's an organic process a little bit, and it's also a controlled kind of, we're gonna move them to the next level as they're working on it. Now, there is a lot of learning, particularly at RVS and MHS, I would say, around we have this information, what's the teaching move we make in order that's going to bring the biggest bang for our buck. And one of the things that teachers are doing right now is they're making a playbook, not only a formative assessment, because there's a lot of common universal skills, right? So we're making a playbook of instructional strategies that really worked, and we have evidence that it really worked in a short amount of time. And we're also making a playbook of common formative assessments. And so then teachers who are maybe not as skilled or are building their capacity still in that kind of intentional teaching will have a resource that other colleagues have created, and we have evidence that it's successful. So we're building that kind of skill. There is a lot of development, though, particularly at RVS and MHS, because it's a brand new thing for MHS. We've never actually had real interventionists here who were targeted in this way. It just haven't had that human resource here before. So we now have that here. Now we have to figure out how to best use it for our adolescents, which is tricky. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, I knew it was a challenge. Just talking more to it is all I wanted you to do.
There's
really,
more learning to be done there.
It's a process. It's a process.
Yeah, it's a definite process.
Oh, yeah, so I mean, this is really interesting that in our district, we haven't seen significant learning loss.
We don't have evidence of significant learning loss. We have evidence of loss in other areas, but not in academic data.
Do you have a sense then how MRPS compares to other districts or schools around the state or around the nation in terms of learning loss?
I only have media reports, right? And that term popped up pretty quickly within COVID, right? Without a whole lot of evidence to back it up. However, I know that my niece wasn't in school for a very long time, right? And so she got a different schooling experience than our children who were in school potted in K-8 to professional teachers. That's a very different learning experience than my niece in Washington, D.C., who was out of school for 2 years and doing virtual learning. So it's tricky to, I don't know, I can make that statement.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
Do you feel that we have the evidence to back that we don't have any learning loss, or that we are learning whether or not we are going to?
We have does not suggest significant learning loss for the majority of our students. That's not to say that there isn't some for some students. I would never make that statement. But the evidence that we have, and this is a good snapshot, and you can click on those links and see, that's kind of, I always say that we use screeners incorrectly. This is actually a correct way to use a screener, right? To look at across time longitudinal data. I will say, however, that Peggy Sue will speak to in just a minute, we have a large uptick in parents requesting special education evaluations right now, this school year. And so that might show some evidence of something else, right? Our academic data doesn't show that we have here. I will say that our social emotional learning data shows that there's a loss, or there's a need for significant supports in community building, relationship building, how we treat each other, that kind of thing.
I lost it. It just went.
Sorry.
Others, or turn it to?
I don't want to derail us, and I think this is fantastic. I love the longitudinal. That's exactly what we've sort of always tried to figure out and don't actually look at, so that's really helpful. I just didn't know if you had any comment about on the earlier slides, and maybe your point was really those are limited in what they can tell us, but the Renaissance STAR math and STAR reading, the much lower scores for Roxbury, like what does that tell us? Like it looks pretty dramatic.
We have our eyes pretty close on the instruction that's happening at Roxbury. I think that we have a lot of capacity building to do and instructional strategies at Roxbury Village School, particularly in the area of reading.
Do the smaller numbers also affect the?
No. Mm-mm. It would with the F&P. That would have because two children would skew it more in a diagnostic.
Kristen?
Yeah, I had a question about the Renaissance. You had mentioned that kind of the color code, that, this is kind of what Renaissance or STAR produces, but that sort of like goes through an MRPS filter, and then it looks differently in terms of how it shows up in intervention and services. How does it go through the MRPS filter, and what does it become?
Good question. So we really focus on that red first for immediate diagnostic, like what's happening. What does Renaissance STAR say the skills are that they're missing? And then let's do some more diagnostics to really understand it and triangulate the data, right? Oftentimes with the yellow, those are grade level, like they're what the child is going to be working on anyway, in perhaps a different way in their grade level. So yes, we look at what those skills are, but we look at it with the lens of what's the student going to be doing anyway during that time, during their grade level, and if they're in the red, then they have the potential from this screening data to need universal skill work, which we have defined as remediation in Tier 3 done by a professional, usually in a one-to-one setting with very targeted skill work. Does that make sense?
Yep.
There's a lot of educational jargon. I'm sorry.
I hear that every now and again. Yeah. Okay. So I'm curious too, if we have interventionists that are budgeted through ESSER. Is any of this
funds?
What's that?
Not just ESSER.
Okay,
Most
so
of
local
them are in local funds.
Okay, so in terms of, is this data that you're seeing redistributing, reallocating? Is there anything, because the interventionists can be fluid between buildings? Is that true? And so I'm just wondering if this is kind of, if there's any.
They're not.
So is any of this data, any rethinking happening in terms of how the district distributes interventionists across the schools?
No, we are not looking at that right now. Not right now. Because there's a lot of feelings and culture involved in that as well. So when we hire them, of course, teachers are district employees, right? They work for Montpelier-Roxbury Public Schools, and if we're If we reassign them based on their licensure, we can't, we have that right to do that. It can be a climate killer. So we do that sparingly in emergency situations. And when I think about Roxbury in particular, so thinking about the number of children who took this assessment and the number of adults available to service them is a very good ratio. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, so the adults in the room supporting while, yeah.
Yeah. There is a very good ratio already at Roxbury Village School. There is a worry I have that I'm sure Peggy Slew can speak to as well. The more adults that are in a classroom, the more enabled the kids become of the adults. So imagine 3 or 4 adults in a classroom, a teacher sends kids off to do independent work, 3 or 4 adults immediately come over, and instead of that child thinking for themselves and starting up the work by themselves, they'll wait until an adult sits with them and you know what I mean, does the work. And we are very helpful creatures, and we do the work for them, right? So we don't want to create that kind of environment either.
Okay, thanks.
Amanda?
Sorry, I remember. Do you think we have enough interventionists to support the reds and the yellows?
The board may see some interventionists coming in the budget in SEL. And at Main Street Middle School, we have 2 math interventionists and 1 ELA interventionist currently. Well, we have 2 math interventionists budgeted. We have 1 hired, 1 open position. And I would argue just by ratio, a school of 400 students needs more there, especially when we know how tricky it is at the high school level to fill those universal skill needs. We want to get them before they go there. So the board may see that in the budget process. That's part of what we're prioritizing. But we also have spent, as Jim can attest, being here the longest, considerable resources since I've started as superintendent to build the human capacity in this field.
Absolutely.
So when I first started, I think we had 2 across the district. And now our team is much larger. So we have spent a considerable resource moving in this direction. I didn't want to put tons in at one point, as Jim can talk to, because I didn't want to put people in without the system in place. And now we're getting the system in place, and we have the human resources to move forward.
Yeah, no, these are systems that are built over time, and there's been huge advancement, but more needed. You ready for?
Jess is up first.
Yay. Thanks for having me back, everyone. So just as Libby was talking about academics, we really work to collect data, analyze it, and then use that to respond and monitor in the SEL world as well. So we've had some really exciting process as far as SEL data. We're certainly still building the systems, but a lot of the SEL data that you're going to see tonight has been brand new for this year. So some of the systems we have are the behavioral dashboard, and that is 3 out of the 4 schools. So RVS, MHS, and MSMS all use the behavior dashboard, and that is really tracking incidents for school per kid. And UES is using Swiss simply because they were used to it and it was really embedded in their culture, but they do very similar things as far as being able to track data. And then our attendance dashboard is thanks to Nick Connor. He has really developed that from the ground up so that we can look at chronic absenteeism. And we, of course, have a lot of individual student data for students who have really intensive SEL needs. We have individual ways that we track data to really ensure that we're catching all the data for those students. So these systems have allowed us to really think about how teachers are responding to data, both at the individual level and at the class level, at the district level. So we have a lot of different levels within, so we can see how teachers are responding and the impact of their response, which can then inform future responses. It also talks about location and the day. We talk about a lot of school and district themes within the data, and we can break down student demographics. So, I'll talk a little bit about who's overrepresented in our data, both in the attendance and the behavioral. Thank you. So again, these have really big growth in the first 2 months of school. We are using this data on a very regular basis for grade level teams, for guiding coalitions, which are really our teacher teams that are moving this work forward, and our resiliency teams, which are essentially our SEL education support teams who are looking at this data and really thinking about how to match student needs with SEL services. So some examples of the work that we've done here is we've started asking questions about themes. So when Jason was presenting to us a few weeks ago for Data Day, we happened to notice, and he pointed out that like Tuesdays seem to be a really big day for whatever reason around student behavior. And just that's an example of something that we wouldn't have been able to catch before, and it was really surprising and unexpected for us. Yeah. Yeah, it's not like near the weekend, it's not transition day. Yeah, so, and then the UES PBIS team has been really wonderfully using this data. They reflect on this every other week. And they recently just put together a full school assembly because they were looking at the data and seeing that playground behaviors were the highest, and that was some learning that needed to happen. So they put together this really adorable assembly about how to keep your body safe and make good decisions on the playground. And they're tracking the impact of that over time and have seen a decrease in playground behaviors. So teams that are really leveraging this data to make our schools just really respond to SEL needs for kids. We're also using this data to look at what are critical needs for teachers in SEL work and in behavior work and in engagement work. So we have used this data, I've used this data regularly working with restorative practices, with John Kidda, with Up for Learning, and with Joelle, and thinking about what do teachers need right now based on some of the learning loss in SEL that we're seeing because of COVID. What do we need to focus on as far as wellness and community? As I said, we're also using this data as EST teams to really look, oh, sorry, thank you. Oh no, can you go one back? Thank you. To really look at individual students. So when we're hearing kids pop up, both we're thinking about students who just are popping up, both from teachers bringing them forward to particular teams, and then we're also able to identify students who may have gone through and not been identified from teachers. And so we're making sure that we're catching kids earlier and more proactive through this data use. And then we're really able to connect them with really particular and targeted SEL instruction to work on the needs that we're seeing based on the data. And then the UES special teachers, another example of them just leveraging the data, they've actually decided to track changes in their responses. So every single week, the UES specials teachers are looking at this data, looking at Swiss data, and thinking about, okay, what is this data showing us? So what's the common language we're gonna use for this week? What is the particular SEL skill that we're gonna teach these folks? And they're keeping that consistent. So every specials teacher is using that same language, and it's really, they're seeing really amazing positive impacts for behaviors in their spaces, and to the point where grade level teams are also starting to leverage that same system. So good progress so far. So again, we're only 2 months in, so we're really thinking about a lot of this data as an early warning system and trying to show predictive factors, particularly when we're looking at attendance, which I'll speak to in a bit. So we're really trying to grow this system. We know that there's still a few missing links, so we're really able to see sort of externalizing behaviors, and we really need to think about how are we catching those students who are disengaging and being more internalizers. So some of the behavior data, what we're seeing by and large is a lot of defiance, wandering, and technology use at 3 of our schools. And then RVS, I'll just put in a caveat, as I was talking to Beth Kellogg, they're using the behavioral dashboard slightly differently over there. So she's only using it for when there are major behaviors versus at our other schools, we're documenting real teachers are using it on a regular basis. So I just feel like there's a really big discrepancy, and that's certainly not accurate to what is happening in the behaviors that we're seeing at RVS. That is simply a reflection of the different ways the tool is being used. But again, when looking at this data, we're really seeing just engagement being the main thing that we're concerned about right now with our students, and how they're engaging in some avoidance behaviors. And so that's one of the focuses actually of a lot of the admin work, and the work that we're doing to move that forward is how do we get kids engaged, how do we welcome them back into our community, and how do we ensure they have the SEL skills to be engaged and stay engaged in our communities. In the data, free and students who are eligible for free and reduced lunch and students with disabilities are overrepresented in the students who have incidents in our systems. I think some of that for students with disabilities is that there are some students who are on plans because we know that they have SEL needs and they have specific plans around SEL challenges, and often they're monitored a little bit more. So, and I also want to just really reflect on that as a district, because that's something that certainly we need to pay attention to. Just some of the examples, again, at the district level, we're really using this data to think about professional development needs for teachers. What are some of the skills and tools that we can support teachers in developing as we think about embedding SEL more and more into our world here at MRPS. School-wide, we're using this data and regularly reflecting on it to set expectations, use common language, and thinking about sort of school-wide responses to behaviors that we're seeing. And then the individual levels, we're using it to connect individual students with Tier 2 and Tier 3 interventions based on the needs that they're seeing.
Can I ask a clarifying question? Sorry, before we move on to the next slide. What do those percentages represent? 72.
Oh, yes, good questions. So that's the percent of the total incidents that we're seeing. So out of 100% of the incidents, yeah,
Right.
that's been recorded in the dashboard. So out of like all of the incidents that have been reported in the behavioral dashboard, 72.5% at MHS are because of like defiance or wandering or technology use, that I would frame as sort of avoidance behaviors.
Do we have the number of incidents, or is that?
Not off of the top of my head. I did not, but yeah.
Can we, for future?
Yeah, I have that. So I know at UES it's about 500. I'm not sure the other ones off of the top of my head, and I think that speaks to more of just teachers using this and it becoming a really regular part of their tools, which is right. Like I think I'm excited that we're seeing that many incidents because that means that teachers are actually using this to log behavior and we're able to have more accurate data to reflect on. I don't think it's just a measure of it being that we're having more behaviors.
Does this mean that RVS seems like the difference of behavioral patterns with the vast majority being physical contact as opposed to?
That's what Jess was saying, that Beth is only logging
the
major behaviors. They weren't, the teachers aren't logging minor behaviors.
Okay.
So it looks different. It's just a different way to use it.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, that's helpful. Sorry, I missed that.
Advantage in using the systems consistently.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think
we realized what was happening.
And is that the plan then? Because if I heard you right, that it's not being used consistently, whether it's RVS or whether it's even UES, how they report and whatnot, right? So is that the plan going forward, that at some point we'll use it consistently?
Yeah, that's the
across
hope
schools?
to sort of, yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, it's
But
all right.
yeah, I think this is part of the learning that we're doing, right? We're only 2 months in. This is a brand new tool to a lot of these schools. So thinking about how they're currently using it and how to get it so folks are using it consistency so that we can have more meaningful comparisons across schools and across our district is going to be really helpful. And that's just part of our work moving forward.
One more thing, so in that, I'm remembering some of the things you've shown us, and I'm seeing like a series of columns with different types of behaviors labeled, and then there's sort of ones and zeros or type of thing. Are those in minor moderate, and major behavioral also? And can this be broken out in that way?
Yeah. So I think UES with Swiss has decided to only track major behaviors this year because they wanted to be really clear with what they were tracking. However, how different schools define major versus minor is something that we're still norming and creating consistency with, right? So what RVS, they're tracking majors, and it's the majors that are going to Beth because they're physical contact, the principal. Whereas UES is only tracking majors, but they're majors that teachers are dealing with in the classroom. It's not just the physical contact that's going to the principal, for example. And then MSMS and MHS, both, yes, they're tracking both majors and minors, but I think we have a lot of work to do around clarifying and norming what the difference is and how we define that as a district. So it just didn't, I have that data, it didn't feel particularly helpful, if I'm being honest.
It's getting there. It's a new tool.
All right, attendance. So Nick, Connor, and I spent a lot of time together, so hopefully I do him proud. So just to sort of set context, chronically absent is 10% more of total membership days, so that includes excused, unexcused, COVID-related, and out-of-school suspensions. So because we're only 2 months in to the year, that means it's only 4 days right now. So if you are absent for more than 4 days or more, you are automatically considered chronically absent. So again, we're using that as a predictive and hopefully preventative measure as we're thinking about attendance on November 2nd of the school year. So this graph is really just for show. I have bigger numbers on the next slide because those were hard to read. So currently 27.4% of students in our district are chronically absent. So remember that is 4 days or more right now. That encompasses 313 students, which is just under the size of MSMS, just as a metric, and is about 4,000 days that have been missed already for students this school year. And we're again seeing free and reduced lunch as the highest rates of chronic absenteeism. So while only 27.4% of students are chronically absent, 40.3% of students who are free and reduced are chronically absent. So it's a pretty big spike based on class. And again, free and reduced lunch is a class economic factor. So some of the ways that we're supporting and trying to be preventative in the future is really partnering with students and caregivers. Nick, as I am sure you all know, does a fantastic job of partnering with families and encouraging teachers and other folks in our community to reach out to both students and caregivers when we're not seeing them in school. There's been a lot of collaboration and referrals to SEL teams now that we're building SEL EST teams that are really getting skilled at meeting kids and their SEL skills and matching them with the appropriate professional to support them. We've been leveraging those teams to really think about some of the reasons behind chronic absenteeism and how to prevent that. And Nick and I are working on an attendance campaign to help shift our sort of cultural knowledge and understanding of absenteeism coming out of COVID, right? Because that needs to shift again because there are some murky boundaries that needed to be murky and loose that we need to really think about why coming to school every day really matters and is important to our community now that we're trying to heal from COVID.
Can you see also like breaking down just free and reduce when you're putting the data in? Are you also, like many of our students also have intersectionalities around race and class and disability and ability. So are you able to see that data now, or is that part of that same?
Yeah, so some of that stuff I looked at, like for behavior, for example, when I looked at it, there was a pretty strong correlation between students with disabilities and students who were eligible for free and reduced lunch. So one of the hypotheses that I had was that they were both overrepresented because they were the same students, essentially. That hasn't been as true when we looked at the attendance data, and that is something that Nick and I spent some time actually today talking about, like, can we see the percent of students who are free and reduced lunch and BIPOC, and we just haven't gotten there yet, but it's possible.
Thank you.
Are there any, or is there any data or trends between like chronic absenteeism and grades, like grade level?
Yes, so it tends to.
If you look on all the fancy slides.
Oh
they're
yeah, go
on
back
there.
to the.
If you
I
go
don't have to
back.
make it up.
There you go.
So yes, so this very tiny graph with the bars on it shows you the trends over time. So there's a little bit more chronic absenteeism when we're thinking about the lower grades at kindergarten and first grade, and then it sort of goes up, and then it dips a little bit again in high school.
And then after that is students with IEPs.
Yes. Yes. So students with IEPs are about 28%, which comparative to 27.4% is sort of right on track.
I think I'm accessing a presentation that's on agenda materials or board packet materials on our website, and that presentation doesn't match this one, so just a note to like update it. Also, wondering about, do we know how the absentee data, do we know how the chronically absent percentage compares to other school districts or the state? Do you have any sense of that?
I do not know that information.
School year.
Okay. And then do you know in years past if the trend is that number drops or rises over the course of the year?
It's a good question. We've never tracked it before.
Okay.
This is the first year we've tracked it, so we would be speaking off of assumptions.
Yeah.
And it looked a lot differently last year when we were like, you got a sniffle, you stay home.
Right. Well, and even this year, people are still.
Total that way too.
Yeah, and we're still very close in. I mean, my
Yeah.
daughter had COVID. She was out for 5 days. Like, she would be considered chronically absent. She's not missed any other time at school, so it's, it's still a little bit unique. But
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
You may have said this, so I'm sorry for asking if you have. Where does the 4 come from?
Sorry, where is the
Where does the 4, number 4 comes from? Why is it
4
4 considered?
Oh, it's
chronically
10% of the total days you could have gotten to school this year so far.
Okay, and it looks like on average, it's 3 days, like we have 1,100 students, 3,900 days absent overall. That's 3 per kid, right? So that's just close to the 4 days, so.
not quite exactly, because we track it in the high school differently. And Nick would, I don't know if Jason, do you know exactly how he figured out how to do it?
Yeah. Jason.
You know it, Jess?
I do. So
Okay.
he explained to me today in preparation for the school board
Oh,
meeting.
sorry, Jess, go.
No, that's okay. So he tracks it by class and not necessarily by day. So that way we get a more accurate perception of total instructional time. So I think there are 4 or 5 classes. How many?
Go ahead, Jason.
6.
6.
Students be marked absent 6 times in a day.
Yes. So Nick has done the math so that for high school students, he looks at total blocks missed and then divides that by to get the full day. So that way it's tracked by class, and then he makes that division so that he can convert it into days. So it may be a student who, missed 1 block every single day for 6 days and not necessarily a full day of school, but that still counts as 1 day of chronic absenteeism. Hopefully that clarified.
Yeah, I was just trying to think that still, even though it's not a direct correlation, 3 absent days per kid on average, that's very close to 4 is what I was thinking.
District-wide.
Yeah, district-wide, yeah. If 4 is chronic absent.
Yeah, and remember, it's really early in the
Yeah.
school year, so we just don't have that many total membership days yet.
Jason's also looking at it super closely from our day-to-day conversation last week, or they're looking at students are most chronically absent for certain periods at MHS each day. Why, like, and then the logical question is, why is it, right? So they're keeping a really close eye on that here, which we've never been able to do before. So like, that's the important thing to put out. Like, we're not only putting our eye on it, but we're talking about why and what we can do about it.
Yeah, so again, I think one of our big successes so far is creating and really developing an SEL data system. A lot of this stuff is brand new. A lot teachers are tracking using brand new databases and forms, and they've bought in, and it's been really, really helpful as far as looking at the data from a district, school, and individual level. So we're able, because of that data, really able to match student needs with professionals to move them forward in the SEL world, and to really thinking about those lagging skills that individual students have and how to move them forward, and then also how to do that on a class school basis as well. We started reflecting and again using data to really move our professional development work forward, and thinking about next year, what do we need? Later this month, what do we need? And the big term picture. Some of our learnings, it's pretty clear that free and reduced folks who are eligible for free and reduced lunch are at a pretty high risk for being chronically absent and for showing up on our behavioral dashboards. So I think that's something that we really need to think about. It's something that we're attending to. As Libby said, like, Jason's working on that. Nick is supporting us and thinking through and really thinking about how to be preventative and how to make sure that kids are able to get to school and families are able to support students in getting to school. We talked about this, but we really need to refine and norm our data use and how we use it, and make it a lot more consistent across the district, because it is being used so differently in different schools, which makes sense based on the fact that this is a brand new system. I'm really excited about increasing SEL across the tiers. There's been some really intentional focus on tier 3 moving into this year, and I'm really excited to think about how to push SEL based on the data into all of the tiers, and thinking about how to embed that more fully. And then, of course, continuing to develop our SEL EST process, since that has been brand new. We've done great work, really strong work, and there's certainly some more work that we can do to make sure that we're really pushing kids forward and moving them forward and supporting them in developing the SEL skills that we know they need to be successful.
Any questions before we turn over to Peggy? Mia?
Jess, do you have any information from families when, you or Nick or someone is talking to them about what it is that's keeping kids from coming to school?
Yes, and I feel like I want to let Nick answer that question on his own right, because I want to protect him and all of the work that he's done in working with families. So.
Can we get a sense of what percentage of the kids in the district are on free and reduced lunch?
Approximately 18.
Okay, thanks.
18 students?
18%
across the district.
18
to 20. 18 to 22, it's higher at Roxbury than it is in the Montpelier schools, but it averages out to around 18 to 22, somewhere in there.
Okay, thanks.
Some families who might qualify for free and reduced lunch, I understand, don't fill out the paperwork. Is that addressed? Does Nick have opportunities to sort of help people with that, or are there numbers out there that are missed?
Oh, there's certainly numbers that are missed.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So
The older the students are, the more it's missed.
Yeah, and I think with the free meals that are happening, right, people aren't as likely to
Aren't
fill that out.
incentivized.
Yeah.
Ready for me?
You're on, Peggy.
Yeah.
I feel like I am between you and the track conversation. Okay, so the data that I have is a little different because right now we don't necessarily have data about students with disability as a whole and their progress, because when we look at things like the longitudinal data, the reason that they have an IEP is because they're below grade level. So one of the things that we have to think about is how to start collecting data around how students are progressing, looking at individual progress and figuring out how to do that into group data. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but anyway, here's what I got. All right, so as of today, we have 143 students in the district, pre-K to 12, that have individual education plans. I separated out K to 12 from pre-K because pre-K is its own beast, and with all our partner programs and stuff, it really skews the numbers. So this is right now what we have, and we have 102 students currently K to 12 that have Section 504 plans. So looking percentage-wise, that means 11% of our K to 12 students have an IEP. The national average is 14.5%. That's based on last year, and the Vermont average is 18.4. So we are below average as far as students on that have IEPs. However, when we look at these two things together, so we're talking about students that are identified as having a disability, we're looking at 20% of our K-12 students. Sure. So an IEP, Special Education Services, they're under an entitlement law, and they are about students who are entitled to specialized instruction, and generally they have some kind of modified curriculum, they have accommodations, but it really is an entitlement law. Section 504 is an access law. It's a non-discrimination law that started after the Vietnam War, and started as a workplace law that has moved into schools. And so students with Section 504 plans have a disability, and they have accommodation plans to provide them equal access. So it's about looking at what is it that's a barrier to them accessing the curriculum at their grade level, and removing those barriers through accommodations. So. One of the things I thought about like a half an hour before this meeting, so it's not on the slide, but I do have it, is to look at what are the numbers that we've had in the last few years for IEPs, so to kind of look at where that trend is at. So 2018, there were 130, and this is pre-K to 12. 2019, 124. 2020 was 128, and then we went up in 2021 to 138. And this is a child count that is done every year in December 1st. So currently we are above that at 143, and we will have, I'm sure, more than that by the time we get to December 1. So we are definitely trending upwards right now as far as students that we are identifying as in need of special education. Oh, whoops, I'm not the one that's changing it. I can change it on me, but that's not going to change it there. This is just a graph that shows you by grade span where our IEPs and 504 plans are. As you can see, particularly in the high school area, there's a much higher number of students with 504 plans than students with IEPs. So that's just information for you to know. This is looking at the facility where the students with IEPs are K to 12. And again, I pulled out preschool because of all the partner programs. That's tricky. Looking at this, you can see the number of students with IEPs are at UES and at the middle school. Those where the higher percentages are. Looking at where our professional staff are, I would say that is, we have not dispersed our professional staff to equal those percentages. So part of the challenge is the current team teaching plan at UES. So there's a special educator at every grade level. And at the middle school, we actually are down. We are down 3 special educator positions right now in the district. And so we have a hole at the middle school, and so those special educators are doing a great job of picking things up. And we moved an interventionist actually from the intervention group to provide specialized instruction for students in reading this year to try to cover some of the gap that we have in our professional staff right now.
When you say whole, we have those positions available, they're just not filled right now?
Okay. Yeah, we just can't find them. So if anyone's a special educator and for some reason you don't have a job right now, send me an email. So anyway.
I'm sorry, I just
have
a question on that last slide. Sure. So I guess I would expect the number to be fairly consistent moving through the grade levels. Is there a reason why it's like roughly half when you get to the high school level? Do people lose eligibility for IEPs?
So there is a requirement that you are reevaluated for an IEP every 3 years. And so that potentially could be, I mean, the goal of an IEP, right, is to reduce that gap and get to a point where a student is able to access their grade level curriculum with accommodations. So if we are doing our job well, then we would want to see that happen. There are some students that, you know, with the more significant disabilities who are likely going to stay with an IEP throughout their education career, but that could be part of it. I think I haven't been here long enough to figure out if there's another reason for sure around that. Many of there's a lot of students with 504 plans, right, at the high school, and I would say a lot of those are around mental health challenges more than learning challenges. I saw hands.
My same question as always, can this data be, looked at in terms of race, class, and all of that, to look at some of that representation?
It can, yes, yeah. That's going to be part of hopefully a system that we get. The systems that we have for special education paperwork and that kind of stuff don't do that, so it will be a lot of doing stuff by hand. But yes, we can do that some.
We will be able to do it in size, maybe too small.
Right.
Just keeping that in mind.
That's a good, particularly for race. Yeah.
What's the outside MRPS?
Yes, so we have some students that are placed by their IEP teams in independent schools. If most of those independent schools are focused on students with significant social, emotional, behavioral needs, and so that is those students as well as students that go to U32. So we have some students that have IEPs that are part of the exchange program.
So they're still considered
They're still our students, yeah. We remain the LEA, we're still responsible for their education.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. This is looking just at the primary disability category for students with IEPs. And this is K to 12. Developmental delay is just a universal disability category for students that are 3 to 6 years old. So that once you get to 6 years old, then you have to look at the more specific disability categories. As you can see, looking at this, specific learning disability is where we have the most students with IEPs. Other health impairment is students with medical needs, but I would say the majority of those are likely students that are diagnosed with attention deficit disorder. And then emotional disturbance is looking at anxiety, depression, and challenges with relationships and those kind of things. And then we have autism. And then we have 2 categories, intellectual disability and speech language impairment, that those were too small to report. And size. This was interesting when I was looking at this. So as of yesterday, and I actually got more today, we had 21 new referrals for special education since the start of this school year. By comparison, last year at this time, there were only 7. So that's an interesting trend to pay attention to. Most of those referrals are coming from parents. When I was trying to look today to see what are the reasons for those, I would say it's a combination of concerns about academic learning and then also the social, emotional, and behavioral challenges that people are concerned about their children experiencing. So that was just, I thought, interesting information to share. Next slide. Oh wait, did I miss one? No, I didn't. Okay. One of the things that is new this year under the changes in the special education laws or regulations is that there is a more formal opportunity to get parent input. So obviously, parent input is a crucial part of any education plan, and it's something we've always done. Now the new regs require there to be actually a section in an IEP where we are identifying very clearly what parent input is towards the plan. And there are these questions that the AOE has given us that we are to ask students or parents following IEP meetings to get their feedback about the process. We decided in our district that we are actually giving these to all parents of students with disabilities after meetings also for 504, so that we can start to generate feedback around what's going well, what's working for families, what's not working for families. So far, we've had under 10 responses, so when you look at these percentages, it's a small number, but these are the questions that we are asking parents to reflect on after they're having meetings about their children, so that we can look for, are there trends that we need to address as far as families feeling like they are being asked to participate in a meaningful way with their children's in their plan. So that was just a little FYI for you. The next slide, we have contracted with the Ability Challenge, which is an organization who has worked some in Vermont. They actually helped the Vermont AOE write this very large document about eligibility changes. They've worked with the Burlington School District, and they are going to be completing an audit and needs assessment for us around the experience of children with disabilities in our district. So they will be doing surveys, and they'll be wanting to meet with administrators, teachers, families, and students. They're going to be doing interviews and focus groups, classroom observations. They want to observe our team meetings. They are going to want to look at all our documents, and then they'll be here for 2 days, and they've kept a third open just in case they need to be here for 3 days. But we're really excited about having them come and have someone kind of look at our district. One of the things that is a goal of mine is to increase the consistency of what special education looks like between our buildings. There is a big difference in a lot of what happens between our schools right now, which is, I'm sure, confusing for parents when you're used to one thing and then something totally changes. It might not feel like you can trust what's changing because it just feels different. And so we're really excited about, or at least I'm really excited about the opportunity to have someone come in and just kind of look at our system and give us some ideas about what they think we need to move forward and make sure that we are doing the best we can for students with disabilities and their families. So I'm sure that I'll be reaching out to some of you to fill out some surveys and be interviewed.
When you are expecting the report from them?
So they're coming in January. I believe the report, I think March or April is when on their timeline that we would get all that.
Awesome, thanks.
So that is it for special education. And then I also work with our multilingual learners. And just wanted to share, if you go to the next slide, just some statistics around the number of students we have. And I want to just point out the trying to change to a strength-based approach and thinking about these learners as emergent bilinguals, multilingual learners, because boy, I wish I could speak more than one language. And so some of the what we see is really deficit focused, and I think we need to change the narrative around these students that are able to speak more than one language and learn in a language that's not their first language. It's pretty awesome. So 53 students right now total in our district that are identifying in this group. We have 43 of them getting direct services from our teachers, and then another 10 that are being monitored, have family supports, or on watch. And then I just thought it was really cool to see what the languages are that these children are speaking natively and their families. So I'm not going to read it because I would probably butcher saying some of these words, but I thought that was just interesting. And that is it.
Questions for Peggy?
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, what a great presentation. Thank you.
No, this is a fantastic collection of data. It really helps us get a good snapshot of what's going on.
I wish it had its own meeting.
It was planned to have some meeting.
Well, it has had its own meeting. Now we get to go into overtime. Yeah.
I just want to say thank you not only for the presentation, but it's just so comforting, I guess might be the right word, to know that we have your brains behind all of this and the brains of other people who are not in this room. But just hearing the three of you speak to this says a lot about what good hands our district is in. So thank you.
I also want to give props to how new so much of this is, that, it's surprising to know that we did not do this kind of work prior to the last 4 years. So I think we're just on such a great path towards improvement. Thank you.
Mike has been dedicated to this for a while.
It's
A lot of
awesome.
Mike Berry work right here.
Yeah.
To pull things together.
Well, thank you
Excellent. Yeah, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, ladies.
It was super informative.
Maybe you forgot they were all here.
That's the advantage of
Yes. The track presentation and discussion.
Don't we have
Quarter
one financial report?
Do we have quarter? Oh, we do have quarter one.
Amanda,
financial
I'm gonna
report.
Amanda, I'm gonna share that with you.
Yeah.
Maybe we can push that out until after the truck conversation? I mean, I know it's only budgeted for 5 minutes.
Let's push that out till after the. Let's push that out till after the track conversation, because we have people who've been extremely patient, and I'm sure have places they want to go and get to, and I think.
Bedtime.
Yeah. And unless people have objections, let's push the readings of 8:20 through 8:24 to the next meeting, because I think people might want to discuss those and get some context, and we may be stapling our eyelids open by the time we get to that.
Yeah.
And let's aspirationally leave the non-discriminatory mascots and school branding on, because it's a mandatory policy, and I think it's relatively straightforward. And if for some reason we don't feel up to it, we can push that on too.
Okay.
So at the risk of derailing us, I wanted to offer an idea, given the feedback we've gotten so far. It's clear that, reasonable people can disagree about how to spend the surplus money that we have. And thanks to the quarter one financial report, we actually know we have $3 million in surplus, not $2 million. And one of the struggles that I've had with this conversation is the framing of now or never. Essentially, if we don't vote tonight, we won't have a track. And another is that when it comes to the surplus that we're incredibly fortunate to have, we've really only considered the one option. And I don't think that that's the case for our administration. I believe that they have looked at this from many different angles, and I really do trust their work and their analysis. But as a board, by narrowing this conversation to, if not now, never, and simply only considering the one option, I do believe that we have shirked our duty in one of our main roles of community engagement, and that has led to not having a thorough consideration. And the result is that we have unintentionally privileged the perspectives and opinions of those who have been a little bit more in the know over the course of the last year and a half, and left the rest of our community sort of scrambling to catch up. And in the past 2 or 3 weeks, I believe we as a board have also sort of scrambled to catch up with ourselves and do some version of community engagement. I think what Libby and others in the administration have put together for tonight's presentation is fantastic, and I really appreciate it. I also appreciate, Jim, the work that you did to put together the Front Porch Forum post and the time that you've taken to discuss this in depth with certain community members. And Amanda's post, in which she summarized the issue and then directly asked for feedback in a way that could be shared with the rest of us board members. And I'm sure other members of the board have done other things that haven't been quite as, public, that I don't even know about. But I still think that that has been a scramble, and it has been ad hoc and kind of piecemeal. And, we've said that as a district and as a board, we really value equity and inclusion. And that doesn't only live in writing a policy about it, or instructional materials, or considerations for students living with disabilities. It also lives in how we conduct our business as a board. And it is not easy. And it does ask of us that we slow down and provide the space that we need for thorough consideration and openness to perspectives, and making sure that we're hearing and sitting with perspectives from people who don't have the same viewpoint, like literal vantage point that we have on this issue. And I certainly take my own responsibility for this. This is something that we could have put into place and started a year and a half ago, and we didn't really put that into place after we received those two very compelling student presentations. One was on the track, and one was advocating for net zero improvements. And I think we should also give ourselves a little bit of grace in this, because we're not really very well practiced in making big decisions like this, outside of the very specific process we go through in establishing the annual budget. So it's understandable that we would fumble our way through this. And I also think it's not too late. I still think we could do a process that doesn't have to take a very long period of time. We could definitely utilize the great work that the administration has put into the presentation that we are planning on seeing tonight. But take that big step back, start from the beginning, and communicate that we actually have these unrestricted funds. $3 million is a lot of money, and we could be spending it in many, many different ways. We could offer those options of the different ways we could do it, and have that more robust conversation over the next, 4 weeks, 6 weeks. I don't think it has to take very long. And then, and really have that as like a listening sessions, put out a real survey that we have time to digest the information of, and then deliberate after getting that, and make a vote on how to spend this money. I definitely realize that this would be frustrating for everybody who's been advocating for this for a year and a half, and probably for some of my fellow board members, but I think that it is, it's valuable to conduct our business in a way that is thorough and thoughtful, and allows the space for that full consideration, rather than trying to meet a deadline that we might not even absolutely have to meet for the sake of that deadline. So what I wanted to offer was that we, rather than having a vote tonight, we direct that one of our committees designs and conducts that process for determining how to spend these excess funds, and ask that it be completed by the end of the calendar year. So I could make a motion to do that so that we can have discussion about that, or we could, I don't know.
I would like to second that. That is the process we're gonna go through to have the discussion.
I definitely expected this in this order, in fact. Maybe actually after the presentation, but it makes sense. I have seen a tremendous amount of misinformation out in the community, and people here suggesting that this is going to raise their tax rate couldn't be further from the truth. There's a lot of information in the presentation that's here. I don't see, there's no perfect process. I don't see how extending a process that has gotten to be sort of contaminated with bad information is going to make it better. I think it's actually going to make it worse. And I just think that there's, I think that I think I would like to see just just take a vote. I mean, like, you know, if people are uncomfortable moving forward, or then don't. I just don't see how extending the process further is going to make it better. I see it making it more convoluted, giving more opportunity for misinformation and just falsity and rudeness and harm, essentially, that's coming towards us from certain members of the community. I don't want to be subjected to that. I know it's going to happen if we make a vote one way or the other, but I'd like to move past it. And I'd like to get on with work that I know we need to do. That's how I feel about it. I really, and I can be in the minority, but that's how I feel.
I second that, and I would very much still like to see that, at least maybe quickly, but I would like us to actually take the time, because we can't speak out of both sides of our mouths where we ask for information. We have a whole bunch of information that's been prepared for us, and then we're not even going to consider it. I'd also like to remind us that we already voted on using our fund balance, the 1.5 million, back in April, after a very compelling presentation from a lot of these same people. And I am not willing to go back on the agreement that we made. I'm not unvoting on that. So from my perspective, what we are trying to consider is, and we do actually, if anyone actually wants to bother to read it, Anna has put together a fantastic multi-page list of all the times we as a board have talked about it, made actions on it. I'm really disappointed and upset by the amount of information and how personal and unhelpful it has become, because it really allowed the conversation to get clouded. I don't need to go any further, but I just want to remind us that in April and June, we heard from our community, and we actually voted unanimously to support using this very small piece of a very helpful little savings account that we happen to have for a very dire need in our community. If nothing else has compelled folks to this, the gentleman saying the parents are out there painting the pieces and the students are having to work on their own track. I mean, come on. It's a track for our students, and you do. Any day of the week you come here and you see students on that track. There's Girls on the Run for elementary and middle school. This is a major investment. 20% of the entire middle school population does track. So I feel very strongly, I do feel like we've taken the time. We have definitely learned some lessons about better community engagement, absolutely. But I do think we have done our due diligence. There has been a subcommittee of the board that has had multiple communications that are open to the public about the track. We should also be allowed to ask questions about, well, while we're digging up the track, what if we fix these things? And unfortunately, that opened up a floodgate of a lot of misinformation, lesson learned. But that being said, I want the community to understand we as a board need to be able to ask these questions. That is very different than making a decision. We can ask the question, how much is it going to cost to replace the lighting? How much would it cost to fix the turf? How much would it fix to fix the parking lot or the auditorium? We need to be able to ask those questions and not being attacked for asking the questions. That is very different than taking a vote. And we take using the community's money incredibly seriously. We are missing time with our families. We've been cleaning the school during COVID. We have dedicated hours and hours and hours because we absolutely care about and take seriously our responsibility to use the community's money. I think I'm done. Thank you.
I just want to say a few things. One, I do think the process on this has been imperfect. I also think that we don't have a prescribed process for this. We don't have a prescribed process for doing something like this. My inclination is to follow the lead of the administration. The administration knows their needs, they knows their priorities, they know what the investments have been made, they've been educating us on the revenue streams, they've been educating us on how things have been funded. And if the administration feels there are competing needs for this money, I want the administration to explain it to us, and I want us to go through the process of making a decision. I am very reluctant to have a choose your own adventure on how to spend $3 million with the community. I think that is a recipe for a community food fight and for misinformation. I think if we put up straw proposals, here's an instance. We have spent a lot of money on putting props behind our academics in light of COVID with the ESSER money. We've gone through a very public process on that. If we create the impression that this money can be spent on, quote unquote, learning loss, which definitely exists, but we've also addressed the ESSER funds. I think the community debate will be, if we pull back on that and don't do it, that we don't care about learning loss because we haven't spent that money. If we put up certain proposals and then take them down for the purpose of putting up a straw proposal, in a theoretical situation. I just think that's a huge recipe for more misinformation. I think we saw it with our consideration of the turf field. I think that was an honest consideration. It was brought actually through the process that we had, because community members came to us and they said, here's something we want you to consider. We considered it. And it created a lot of misinformation. And not that it's a bad thing, but I think if we're going to have a process like that, it should come from the administration saying, we have 3 or 4 different ways we want to spend this money and we want community input on it. We're not getting that from the administration. The administration is instead telling us, here's the funding streams, here's our priorities, these are being taken care of. So it's been an imperfect process. I apologize for that, but I think creating process for process sake and in a manner that could create a lot of misinformation and false promises to the community, I don't think that services us well. And I think we should have a discussion about how we go through the process like this again, because this is a unique situation. It's, it's not a bond. I'm kind of comparing it to the bond where, the administration came to us, this was several years ago, with a whole bunch of needs. We didn't ask the community if they agreed with those needs or not, but we obviously, went to the community with a bond, but then explained why the $5 million was there. We didn't have a process of, if we went with a $5 million bond, what we wanted to spend it on. The administration told us what those needs were. And I think we should take the cues here. The administration should tell us what the needs are for this money. We should listen. If we feel it's a justified need, I think we should move ahead. And if we feel that there are questions about whether the need is justified, let's ask those questions and have the administration explain it. And if it presents a situation where we need more community input to make a decision, let's do that. But I want to hear from the administration about what their priorities are and how they feel the money should be spent. And then I think we should make a decision about whether or not that makes sense and justified to the community. And I also want to make very clear, this is a real gift expenditure. The tax implications here are essentially nothing. And I also want to put it out there, just practically, is there anyone on this board who feels that the current track is in a satisfactory condition and we're going to do nothing and just let it deteriorate? I mean, the track's an embarrassment. And I know that I might be seen as a track fan. I'm not. I mean, I'm a runner. Nathan, do I run on the track ever? I avoid the track like the plague. It's boring as hell. But I know the benefit that it brings to the great kids that are in this room, the kids that are coming up, the 80 kids at middle school. I also know, and there's been this thing in the community about let's spend on wellness and mental health. There's really no better way than increasing extracurricular activities for to deal with wellness and mental health and to build community, to build confidence, to build all those things. I spent the last couple summers in Iceland, and Iceland has done this amazing thing. They had a huge substance abuse and other problems in teenagers extreme oftentimes by the stress and anxiety they were dealing with. They made a huge countrywide investment in extracurriculars and facilities. There are 1,000 people towns in Iceland that have nothing around them, that have much better facilities than we do. Over an 18-year period, they've seen a drop in extreme alcohol use and alcohol abuse, in 15 and 16-year-olds from 40% to 5%. They've seen a drop in cannabis use from 17% to 7%, in daily smoking from 20% to 3%. I mean, granted, it was with some other measures. They've also seen a participation in sports increase from 23% to 46%. So these investments in extracurricular activities are some of the best investments in mental health and well-being we can make. And we oftentimes skip the preventative side of these investments and look at the treatment side, but this is an investment in community. It's an investment in our kids' health, both physically and mentally. It's an investment in the great efforts of Nathan and Dylan and Dan Vosjan, and I'm forgetting a bunch of other people who've spent time with these kids and built this program basically for free. And it's also an investment in increasing our tax base. I mean, we have people who are coming to Central Vermont looking for a place to live, looking where they want to bring their kids to school, and we all know that each student we bring to our district, our taxes go down. When we increase our per pupil numbers, our taxes go down. And when we have a mud pit that's supposed to be a track and people are looking at facilities and they look at, U32 or South Burlington or Essex or CVU or MMU or all of our competitive schools, and they've invested in their facilities, it tells them something. And that brings tax dollars and the needed families that we want moving into our district out of our district. If you have someone who cares about facilities and wants a high school that looks like it belongs in the 21st century, they're going to go to Middlesex, not Montpelier. And we have to be cognizant of that. This is on its merits a very easy decision. And there's been a lot of confusion and there's been a lot of community pushback. And unfortunately, some of it came from, from Grant exaggerating the clawback risk. I apologize for that. But that still does not take away from the merits of this project. So I really want to hear from the administration. If there are competing resources for this funds that we really have to be worried about, let's hear about them. If not, this is a great one-time investment in our community and our kids. It's going to have a 20 to 30-year payback. And frankly, I hate to use the word a no-brainer, but this is a no-brainer investment of funds.
I was looking at all the months and months ahead and how this came out, and I stumbled upon a training we got around white supremacy culture. And Mara, one of her little quotes said, "Cowardice asks the question, is it safe? Expedience asks the question, is it politic? Vanity asks the question, is it popular? But conscience asks the question, is it right?" And there comes a time when one must take a position that is neither safe, nor politic, nor popular, but that feels right. And this is not against the track. I want to be very clear. I have not slept in weeks. I have thought about this left and right. I love running. I love the benefits, but I have a lot of questions. One is the process. And we need to be humble and say we messed up. The process was not right. We had plenty of opportunity to say to the public, this is what we're doing, and we said, we've heard enough. We had enough from 31 people. There's a danger of that single story that you all know a lot, that we've been talking about this for a year and a half. That's not my story, because I didn't. I'm not in this facilities committee. I'm not in the financial committee. I've seen 2 reports in the infrastructure. And so the story that I have is very different than the story that Jill might have, who is talking to the kids in the track, in the soccer field. That is not my experience, right? Like, the community that I talk to is very different. And that's what makes this board great. You're an athletic, that's great. I stumbled to run 1 mile once every 3 months and feel proud of myself for it. That's not. The community that I talk to are community of parents who have come here too to say, hey, our kids are struggling on special ed. Hey, our kids are struggling on bullying and harassment. Hey, that's the community that I am mostly in touch with all the time. So I think for me, this danger of we did enough, we listened, here's all the people that came. I wanted to hear from the people that didn't come, that didn't know that this happened. And it's an anxiety that it creates. For you, maybe the process is enough. For me, it wasn't enough. For me, this process is enough. I wish I could have spent time with the students and say, hey, let's look at the big picture. Let's look at these needs, these needs, these needs. Yes, we want to do the track. Is this a decision we have to make today? There's a little bit like this vote of this 1 million. It was misleading, right? And if you look at the recording, I said, I am voting with the full understanding that I can change my mind once we look at this big picture, that this is for auditing purposes. I would have voted no, because I still think that the process, that we have an opportunity as a board to think cohesive about the big picture. I was in that same training that Libby was at the report. One of the things that I see is our job is to be looking from the top down to the whole picture. I don't like to be at the top. I like to be in the bottom and look up. That's just my way. Looking at the big picture. And I don't feel like don't have all the information. We have a special ed report or audit that's going to come up. Looking at all of this, like the presentation today was great. We still got a lot to learn to be able to see. Again, this is not against the track. It's saying, let's build a system. You've been here 7 years. You know the track. Why do we have $3 million? We could have planned this. This is going to be a need. We need to plan this ahead. This is the way that collectively we need to start looking at the way that we manage the school funds. It's like the big plan of the great report that the facilities committee has done, the fact that we need some ADA accessibility at Roxbury, that should be one of the things that we need to look at. It's like, yes, I want to hear. It was the first time, and then when I read, I've never heard the administration say, this is a must, we must do it. It's part of, like, here all the things we could do. And so was it a lack of the process for the infrastructure committee that heard this 15 times and didn't come here to report only once that this was going to happen and it was going to have to move? That is and important. I'm going to end by saying I do believe this white supremacy culture sense of urgency. We need to decide. You need to decide on this vote of $2 million, and then you need to decide if construction needs to happen. We need to rethink the way we work together. There's the way that we can think about, so the antidotes for working on this is realistic work plans based on the lived experience of the people. Okay, leadership who understand that everything takes longer than anyone expects. A committed to equity, including commitment to discuss and plan for what it means to embed equity in this. One of the things that I am struck by thinking about disability, and then I was looking at our website, we have this great program of unified sports. There's also, and then I brought these questions before, when we're looking at the track, are we thinking about how to include students with disabilities in our track and field, not as a unified sport, but as an adaptive sport? And there's all kinds of information out there. And I asked the question, when we're putting out the track, are we thinking of students in a wheelchair? All these decisions is not for today or for your kids, but 7 years from now. How are we thinking about this inclusion in there? And those are, questions that maybe you guys already have in there, but I'm not taking this lightly, and I'm not saying no to the track. I'm saying let's think through this, and if we decide here, this is the plan, this is how we're going to allocate this track. Nathan talked about borrowing equipment. Like, do we need to add equipment to this thing? Like, what is the, we're doing this, $2 million is also bare bone, right? It's just that. Is that track? You're buying equipment with the $2 million too? So I think the fact that you're saying the community is fighting, it's okay. That's our job, to listen to discomfort. Being uncomfortable, it's okay. I am okay for people that don't agree with me. I am okay. This is part of the process. We have to be okay. The students have to be okay for us to be here disagreeing in something so important.
At the risk of not being as articulate as the rest of my board members, who seem to have come very prepared with lots of notes, I did want to just weigh in. I agree with everything that has been said from everybody. And so mostly that I really welcome a robust public input process. So the fact that, whatever misinformation or ideas that were sort of spread or sparked from the question of adding the turf to the project, that for me was a welcome part of the process, because at least it got people involved. And before that, people weren't really involved. We weren't hearing from a lot of people that were outside of the track community. So now as board members, we've been able to see a public debate unfold online. We've been able to receive maybe 100 emails, wasn't counting. But if anyone didn't read through the policies that are on the agenda tonight, it's because they were reading email and input from all of our constituents. So to me, like any democratic process is improved with public input. And it has definitely helped me, understand where the community is at on this issue. And one of the first questions I asked when we talked about this a long time ago was, I'm super supportive of improving our facilities. But I was wondering if it really aligned with the community's values. And, I think it does, but I also saw that there was a lot of misinformation and a lot of fractions of our community that didn't feel like they were involved in the process. And I don't see why we can't make space for those conversations to happen. And that was the question I asked at the last board meeting. I was trying to get to the bottom of what is the urgency of a vote one way or the other today at the last meeting or today at this meeting. And we spent some time discussing that at tonight's Facility and Energies Committee meeting with Andrew, really trying to get at the heart of, we've already sort of earmarked this 1.5 million. So why is it so urgent that we make the vote on the additional $400,000 tonight? And after a little bit of question and answer session with Andrew, and I don't want to misrepresent what you said, but it sounds to me like there may be sort of a middle road diplomatic path forward that will both allow for potential groundbreaking of the track in spring of 2023 and time for us to engage our community a little bit more on at least the misinformation, at least giving our community enough time to ask the questions that they feel haven't been answered, and then for us to respond to a lot of the obvious misinformation that has occurred in the public dialogue. And that would be to approve funding to move forward with the engineering process and the design process of the track to create what Andrew described as shovel-ready plans for a track. And that would be an
I'm sorry?
I said I didn't need to give you.
That's okay. There's nothing here I can say that's going to add to the conversation, but the only thing I agree that we should hear from the administration that put a presentation. I don't see a reason why we shouldn't. And we represent the community, and we've heard from the community and we've heard different opinions. I personally think that if we do vote, which I think we should, that's going to represent that, right? So I don't understand the reason let's not vote, because that's where the community is. So community is not 100% behind this. I get it. So we might not be 100% behind this, but what's the point of not voting? Especially if this is the first time we're talking about it, I get it. This is not the first time we're talking about it. We have talked about it, and I understand the concerns that we may not have gotten all the information, or not everybody would have had a chance to look at it and all that stuff. I do get it, but yeah, again, there's nothing I can say that hasn't been said before. So.
Should I say before we go on, I apologize to those at home. We lost our internet for a little while in the district. The network went down at a very inopportune time, because that was an excellent discussion. But I apologize to the people at home. And I believe you were still videoing that conversation, correct?
Yes.
So it will be available to the public, but that was miserable timing on our internet's part. So I'm
And thank
sorry.
you for the impromptu tech support.
Yeah, behind the scenes. Rather embarrassed that happened. Anyway, should we go move on with the presentation?
Yes, please do.
All right.
No, it's not the first time it's happened.
Yeah, so when I was putting this together, I wanted to put, because of the misinformation that was just discussed in the public, I wanted to put infrastructure spending in a funding context for everybody. So Amanda, you can keep moving forward there. Thank you for being my Vanna. So in general, there are 3 different funding sources when we're talking about infrastructure. This is every year. This is not COVID specific. This is not ESSER specific. This is every single year when the school board decides on a budget and the communities vote on it. There's the local budget. This local money, it's a tax dollars that we collect from our community. It's basically our yearly budget process, right? So in FY23, infrastructure spending within our local budget was approximately 10% of that budget cost. So the year we're in currently. And what do we use that for? We use it for general upkeep, classroom renovations, general buildings and grounds updates, just the general things that we know happen every single year. They're routine, they're expected. We know we plan for them as just general upkeep of our facilities. That's what primarily the community's taxpayers' dollars pay for. Andrew, yeah? Yeah. Then we have our capital plan, which is also something the community votes for in a separate article on town meeting day. And in that capital plan, this is a relatively new piece to the community. It's, I believe the first year that we did a capital plan was my first year as superintendent 5 years ago, and Andrew's first year as buildings and grounds. This is also local money. It's voted on town meeting day. It is considered part of our local budget, although it's a separate vote from the community. And that last year represented 1% of our budget. And in the capital plan, this is to avoid big bonds going in the future. Because we're currently, Christina, we have 3 bonds that we're paying back currently. So the idea of a capital plan was to try to decrease our reliance on bonds. This is for larger infrastructure needs that are planned. So for example, we did all the bathroom replacements that somebody referenced earlier, roofing here at MHS. We have plans for the next 5 fiscal years for window replacement at UES and MSMS. We've done gym renovations over at MSNS last year with our capital plan. We have a plan that's part of our budget presentation that you can see from last year's budget presentation, and you'll see again this year budget presentation, a plan in place that goes through FY28 for that money. After FY28, we do not have plans for that money. So when we get into the future that Andrew was referencing the last budget or the last board meeting around what are potential future needs, keep in mind that in 5 years, we're going to have $260,000 not planned for, and that we have time in the next 5 years to plan for what we use for that. Capital plan also rolls over. If we don't spend it, it stays in that account for us. So capital plan can grow if we don't spend it. We have plans to spend it, right? So we budget for that amount of money. And then state and federal grants. So this happens to be where ESSER comes in. There's a supply chain assistant this year. Efficiency Vermont had a state grant. We're not sure if that is actually from federal money or if that was state money. And what we did with that is a lot of air quality work, infrastructure around air quality needs, getting needed PPE for our staff and our students, and some larger renovations that we'll go into. ESSER does have requirements for expenditures outside of infrastructure that is well detailed in our ESSER plan on the website. It's also linked in this presentation. And we went through a lengthy process around how that is funded. So when I'm speaking of ESSER funds here, I'm speaking of just what's in the infrastructure piece of the ESSER funding. But that is a much larger pot of money that we're doing a lot of other things from. For instance, our talk space commitment for a pilot for the next 2 years, the virtual mental health services, that's also coming out of ESSER. We have interventionist positions in ESSER. We have a lot of professional development for high quality teaching in ESSER. Those kind of, like, a lot of things are in there. And I encourage people, if they haven't looked at our public plan for the ESSER money, to go look at that plan, because you'll get more information than just what you're going to get tonight on that. Go ahead, Amanda, thanks. So what are some of completed or planned projects within these three funding sources? Within our local budget, we have recently completed yearly classroom renovations. Andrew just talked to the board a lot about that. We do approximately 4 classrooms a year in terms of renovations, doing the paint, the flooring, major clean. MSMS, UES, and RVS all got updated bathrooms. The ceiling and lighting at MSMS was done through the local budget. Stairwells at MHS, MSMS, and UES were done with the local budget. What's planned, that's part of our budget conversation that we're having right now as an administrative team. So using local budget funds, that's part of our conversation we're having right now. The board will see what we plan for the next local budget when we present the budget, the first meeting in December. In terms of our capital plan, the MHS roof was completed in 2019. MSMS bathrooms was completed in 2020. MSMS basketball court, was completed in 2021. The UES sensory room was done in 2021. I guess we have the gym. Oh, the basketball court for outside. Sorry, with all the drainage problems. That was done. The gym was also done 21, 22, and the UES multi-purpose room in 2021. With the capital plan dollars. The future plan, again, in the budget presentation from last year, will also be in the budget presentation for this year, is the UES auditorium, which of course has desperate need for a facelift and will be a tremendous community resource for a small theater for both our students and community members in the arts once that's completed, because it is a beautiful space. The MSMS UAS windows will be done, which is a very needed infrastructure project that we've talked about at length at board meetings. That will be done through 2028. Is that wrong?
Well, I just want to make sure you had it wasn't just next year.
Yeah, no. It's 22 through 2028, because it's a longer term project. We're doing some windows at a time. And then at MSMS, we have plans in the capital plan for the sustainability program, which is probably one of the most innovative programs in the state right now to really redo that classroom so it's even more innovative for our students at MSMS. And also the STEAM programming that is in its first year at MSMS to produce student leadership voices and choice in a different way than what we've traditionally done at MSMS. That will be happening 2023-24 as planned in the capital plan. The state and federal grants, we've already completed a whole bunch of HVAC improvements and direct digital controls to bring us into the 21st century there. And we've had air purifiers for every classroom, that kind of thing for PPE and also PPE and that kind of stuff. What's planned for future federal grants in UES, we have the little gym renovation, which is in desperate need of facelift as well. We're working with Max and Emmanuel down there around little gym renovations. The special education suite at UES is right now an adult space, and we want to move it into an instructional space. So that is in plans to use with ESSER 3 money as well, for our students with special needs at Union Elementary School. At Main Street Elementary, we desperately need a playground that fits the adolescent need to give our adolescents something more to do at MSMS during recess. We all know the cafeteria and kitchen needs a good renovation at MSMS. That is also within the ESSER plan, to provide more room and also more usable space for our chefs there. And the Thrive space is already received a renovation that should have already been completed. Sorry, that's in the wrong spot. Thrive is our program that we're building right now for students who have significant skill building needs in social emotional learning. So that space has been completely renovated. That's in the wrong spot. And I apologize there. It should have been in the recently completed because it was done this past summer. At MHS, we have a need for a special education life skills transition classroom. So this is a classroom that's upstairs and need a sink so we can teach kids how to cook. We can teach kids those life skills that they're going to need once they graduate from us, so they can have more independent living for students with significant special needs. So that's all within our ESSER plan in terms of infrastructure. We went through a long process of what our needs were around that piece. And I think that's an excellent use of those funds that are going to benefit not only our students, but also our community. Go ahead, Amanda. In terms of federal grants, the ESSER infrastructure, this is just pulling it out a little bit more with it. We've gotten 3 ESSER grants, 1, 2, and 3. One was primarily spent on classroom, multicultural classroom libraries for Main Street Middle School. We spent $100,000 on new texts for kids at Main Street Middle School. For classroom libraries, we also at that point in the pandemic needed more one-to-one laptops for kids because they were breaking. So they were using them, they were at home and stuff. So we brought a lot of one-to-one laptops with ESSER 1. That's why it's not on here. It didn't really have to do with infrastructure. Although it was a long time ago, so I just wanted to remind people of what we did with that. ESSER 2, that's where we brought the hydronic valves, outdoor air damper control units. These are words I've never truly said before outside of board meetings, control modules and control wiring, which Andrew has gone through an in-depth plan with our engineers as to how to get our HVAC systems working to their max capacity. So we have the best air flowing through our systems, which of course is important during COVID. Then ARP ESSER, that's the link to the full plan. I've already gone through those pieces, but just so we can see which ESSER grants paid for what was important. So let's talk about that fund balance that we have. And this is going back really to basics, just what is a fund balance? And in the most basic sense, it's our savings account for surplus money. So it's money that's been budgeted for in our local budget. We've received that money from the tax base and it wasn't spent for a variety of reasons. This fund balance can accumulate across several years. Okay, so it really is a rainy day savings account for whatever reason. If we come out with money that's a surplus at the end of our year, our auditors help us figure out what that is, and they put it in the fund balance. It is a well-documented thing in every one of our auditing reports. I know this because Christina and I spent about 4 hours yesterday digging into the past 6 years of auditing reports to try to determine exactly what the reason why we have such a large fund balance. At the most basic level, it's just, there's a variety of reasons. And the pandemic has thrown us for a loop on what we budget for versus what we spend for the past 3 years. And while it could be poo-pooed, substitute teachers, we literally didn't use substitute teachers for a full school year, like not once, but we had them in the budget, right? So that is a significant expense that if we budgeted for that money, we thought we were going to need it. The pandemic told us differently. We potted people up with 2 adults in every classroom. There was no need for substitute teachers. So that pot of money we don't lose that. That goes into the fund balance. But for a more specific amount, keep going. For more specific, this is what our auditors say. In 2017, which was pre-merger and pre-Libby as superintendent, our fund balance amount was $1,795,000 essentially. In FY18, it dropped a little bit. We spent in a deficit that year. right? So what was the reason why it dropped $394,000 was in our auditing report said buildings and grounds expended more than budgeted. Andrew, Christina, and I had a good conversation about that because it was pre all three of us. And we are going to make the assumption that it was because of soil testing at UES for the playground. It was right before the bond was taking place. A lot of soil testing had to happen that we didn't account for. And the best we can say is that that probably was the increase in the decrease in the fund balance that year. The best we can tell. In FY, huh?
And I don't.
Yeah, I asked Jim too. You know, FY19, we had over $2 million, so we had a significant increase to our fund balance. In FY19, what happened according to our auditing report is that we had lower healthcare costs than budgeted. When we budget for healthcare costs for new employees, say, we always budget for a family healthcare plan. Sometimes we hire where it's a single healthcare plan or the person doesn't take healthcare. That's a savings of approximately $20,000 when that happens. So you have 3 or 4 people who do that, which is possible, and you get significant health savings in what we have budgeted for healthcare costs. At that point, we had merged with Roxbury. Montpelier had merged with Roxbury. We had expected that in the beginning of the merger, Roxbury students they had school choice in high school. And so part of the merger agreement was an agreement that the students who were in their present high school did not have to come to Montpelier High School, that we would pay their tuition. And they'd kind of be grandfathered in that way. And so that year we had less Roxbury students tuition to other districts. And my memory serves me correctly, a lot of that had to do with if a Roxbury student was going to Northfield and decided to go to the tech center, they could do that under our realm too, right? So they go to the same tech center. So it wouldn't be a tuitioned experience for that student, that rather it'd be one of our students who went to a tech school. Does that make sense? So that's one of the reasons why there were less Roxbury students who were tuition. We had to pay the tuition for other schools. And then special education costs came in lower than expected. There can be lots of reasons for that. We build our plan for our special education costs for the budget in October the year before. So when we do that, we're making assumptions based on the service plans that we have in October the year before. Those service plans could change. Kids can move. We could get, kids could learn a lot of skills in one school year, and may not need that 1-to-1 aid anymore. So there's a lot of differences a year makes, and we do the best we can with our service plans the year before the budgeting process. So special education costs came in much lower that year. In FY20, that was the year that we closed, COVID closure. And our fund balance grew during that fiscal year to $2,975,000. Special education staffing needs came in much lower than expected. We had lower healthcare costs than budgeted. We had less Roxbury and private pre-K students tuition to other districts and programs. Remember, we pay tuition for pre-K students who go to private pre-Ks. And when schools closed, parents didn't send their kids to pre-K. And so when you have 20 kids, that equals up to a lot of money. Transportation was obviously significantly less than budgeted because we weren't using our buses when we closed in March. After March, we had no substitutes. We had no custodial overtime. Literally the only people in the building was myself, Jim Birmingham, Angela Rosa, and the principal who was also helping us serve lunch, and one custodian. That was it. And they were only in this building. We were in no other buildings during that closure time. So therefore our electricity bill was significantly less. And then we had savings from new hires. When a person retires, obviously at the end of the pay scale, and we hire somebody at the beginning of the pay scale, that's a significant cost savings. And then in FY22 or 21, remember it was the year of potting and virtual instruction. So approximately a quarter to a third of our student body was in virtual instruction, not on campus. The rest of our kids were potted K-8, and here at the high school, they were here for a significantly different schedule than what they were used to. And so that year, our fund balance did grow significantly to $3,783-ish. We had a savings from new hires. Our professional development, what we budgeted for professional development that year was essentially not used. So every teacher, every professional in our district, including our administrators, have the equivalent of 6 credits at UVM. The monetary equivalent is 6 credits at UVM, which equals what, about 6,000, Christina? 3,000? So when we have 200 people not using that money, that's a significant savings. Transportation was significantly less than budgeted because there's a lack of field trips. There was a lack of co-curriculars. Sports didn't start up until later on in the year, and they were not necessarily going to all the events that they typically go to. We didn't use substitutes that year. Literally, everybody remembers, only board members were allowed to clean the buildings at UES into the buildings. No other person was allowed into our buildings unless you worked here or went to school here. And we had no custodial overtime. Several positions that year were not filled. Custodians, our board members know. So when you have a full year of non-filled positions, that's a significant budget savings. Also in our instructional assistance class situation, we had a lot of openings. We also, in the beginning of FY21, the board offered an early retirement buyout and 4 teachers took us up on that early retirement. We didn't fill those positions. So those were 4 teachers at the end of the salary scale that we didn't have to pay for the entire year because of the buyout. So those are the reasons why our fund balance got to be the size that it got. They're all very legitimate reasons, most of which are out of our control because of the situation that we found ourselves in. Any questions from the board about that piece? Okay, so how does the district determine how to spend fund balance? This is in the fiscal management policy. I just cut and pasted it squarely from there. There is some question, Mia asked a good question around the number 3, the committed piece. And Amanda, if you keep going. As approved by voters, when the voters vote on articles in town meeting, one of the articles every single year is this one. And this is talking to that committed funds. So essentially the voters, when they vote yes on this, they're voting to say that the school board has the ability and responsibility to decide how to spend fund balance dollars. And the legal references are down on that slide for anybody who's interested in that. Go ahead, Amanda. So what have we recently used the fund balance for? COVID PPE. It was beautiful when we had that situation where it was just us. We knew what was coming down the pike. We were being told that we were going to have to take the temperature of every child who walked through our doors. I didn't hesitate when I said, go buy me 1,000 thermometers now and get good ones, right? And we didn't have to hesitate on that kind of thing. We were able to find masks, ventilation in ways that other school districts were not able to find because I said, I don't care what it costs, get them for our staff and faculty. And our people responded and did. Angela Rosa did an amazing job at making sure our ventilation systems were up to date. Tom Allen was on every single piece that we asked him to do, who's our head custodian and our custodial supervisor. So we were able to do these things because of our fund balance. RVS heat pumps, 3 are in place, 3 more will go in soon, and we have plans for 4 more after that. That was some discussion at the finance committee, 3 more. So RVS heat pumps are coming out of the fund balance, which the board approved that cost. We have a confidential outside placement for a special education piece that happened before our time here, my time here, that's in the final year of finishing now. The board has reserved money for a net zero study, which I understand the facilities committee discussed maybe today or is in discussion around right now what we're going to do with that. We have a revenue source in our local budget. So we use our fund balance to offset the decreasing merger incentives that we had received with the Roxbury merger, because we got a big merger incentive, but it decreased each year. And so that kind of is like a tax increase when that incentive decreased. We used our fund balance to offset that. We also have fund balance planned going forward as a revenue source in our local budget should we need it. Now, if we come into a local budget, and Christina's done a really nice job at helping me understand this, if we go and have our local budget set and we have planned, say, $300,000 as a revenue source in our local budget, and we spend less than what we planned to, we don't use that $300,000. It goes into the fund balance. It goes back into the fund balance. We just don't use it. And so that's happened what we saw twice maybe in the last 5 or 6 years that we were looking at. And we've done increases to salary lines, particularly our food service at unplanned times, particularly in the last couple of years. So we've used fund balance to be able to do that piece. And I think that's, oh, I can't move it. Sorry, I'm like, that's not it.
I didn't understand the tax piece around like the local budget. Can you explain that to me?
Yeah, so we have used in the past the fund balance as a revenue source in our budget to decrease the tax impact on our taxpayers. Are you talking specifically about the merger piece?
So, yeah, not that one. So so you use that money to say, okay, here's our local budget. And instead of 1 million, it's gonna be 700,000 that you're voting for because we're using 300 out of the fund balance.
Yes.
Which means that the tax base is only getting taxed on the 700.
Right.
You did that in last year's budget.
We've done it in every budget since I've been here.
Okay.
Yeah. Amanda, you can keep going. So what's in the fund balance now? The finance committee just had a presentation about this. It's directly out of the first quarter report. Our auditor has been in our offices for the past several weeks, and Christina asked her to look at this specifically for the board. So this is from the auditor. While it's not a hard number, it's as close to a hard number as it possibly can be right now without having the audit report in our hands. Unaudited fund balance is $3,894,311. The assigned fund balance, so things we've looked at, so assigned is for the budget revenue, what I was just talking about, is $700,000 for this year's budget that we're in currently and through FY 26. We've assigned that. So we're already planning on putting some of this fund balance towards our local budget to decrease that tax base, what we were just talking about, Amanda. The board has committed 1.5 million for the track. So we're decreasing that from 3.8. And then the unreserved set asides for the outside placement, the net zero, the heat pumps, that kind of thing, that equals 105. So we want to subtract those three numbers, 7, 1.5, 100. And the current unreserved fund balance, that means there is no attachment to it, is 1,593,811. Our policy dictates that we want to have, our rainy day fund should be 2% of our overall budget. Right now, we're at 5.86% of our overall budget. And so with the additional 400 that the board could or could not be voting on tonight, that would leave 1,049,834, and it's still over the 2% limit. Okay, Anikit did some good math today. I'm totally putting him on the spot right here. But he figured out what the 2% was. It wasn't on the slide. It should have been. Anikit, do you remember that? $550,000 is the 2%. Okay, so we're way over the board policy for the 2%. Amanda, you can keep going. Sorry to make you do that.
No.
So future infrastructure needs, Andrew put together the facilities report. It's linked here. It's on our webpage under facilities. It's on the board page. It's also here. And I sat Andrew down. I said, okay, look at these projects that we presented last week and tell me when. Tell me when you're thinking. And so he said, about when, because we're not sure, right? So about when projects already planned for with local capital and grant fundings are happening in the next 4 years. Nice to have, like, hey, if you were thinking about something, relocate the central and business offices to some other space, renting in town perhaps, so that we can increase the capacity for academic spaces here at MHS. Jason, put your arm down. In 5 to 10 years, needed projects are going to be the fire alarm panels, the elevator machine room upgrade here at MHS, flooring at MHS, potentially PCBs that's testing dependent, and the Main Street Middle School where they're not adding on a roof, but where the addition was, that's worded strangely, where the addition was put in the 80s and new roof there. Keep in mind, in 5 to 10 years, the capital plan does not have an assigned cost to it, right? At that point in time, if we go by our plan, the windows will be done. And there is nothing for something there. So the capital plan will be available for any needed projects then, and ones that we haven't thought about because it's 5 to 10 years down the road. Nice to have projects at more athletic facilities upgrades. The MHS gym could use a facelift. Storage for outside, the concession stand, water, dugouts, more athletic kind of pieces for our students. 11 plus years, then we're talking about maybe the roof, but that's like a lot of, like 20 years down the road, Andrew said last week, 15 to 20 years for potentially here at the MHS. And that's a long time to think of nice to have projects. So I'm not, I didn't even kind of go there as to what might be nice to have in 11 plus years.
Andrea, the roof, the 11 years is, you explained this last time, it's to take this one all out and put a new one, right? And what you have, do you have something like that in the 5 to 10 years or no? Like to fix some of this or no?
What we did a couple of years ago during the bond project is a perfectly viable, reasonable solution. Is it a brand new roof? No. So it's probably got a shorter window than a regular brand new roof, but it's not deteriorating. It's not falling apart. It's viable, but we will want to replace it probably in the next 2 years just to get it off the plate. If we have the ability to do it, we get it off the plate. That's one more thing we don't have to worry about. Like I say, Main Street and like as Libby was saying, Main Street and Union, most of those roofs are new as is 5-6 years ago. So those have a good long life still ahead of them.
So why a track? I feel like, go back. Picture speaks 1,000 words there. Go ahead. This is what our current track looks like as of last week. And the picture in the up left, you can't tell where the track starts and the wooded piece ends. For all the pine needles that are on it, I try to take a walk often when it's nice out in the afternoon, and that is not just that day for the fall because pine needles have fallen. That is how it is all the time, including during track season. You can see the tire marks that people have driven on. That is also common. It's also used as a parking lot for the community of Montpelier during bigger events.
Can I clarify that?
It used to be before
Yes,
Andrew.
that is from the soil testing. That is from the drill rig for the soil testing. But your point, we're the only ones that drive on the track.
Now with Andrew there.
Yes.
The building is our beautiful concession stand that I'm being a little facetious and sarcastic when I say the word beautiful. We don't use it currently. It's just not used. Matt, is it ever used right now?
Recently, yes. We started.
You started it just recently.
I've been in there. It's a little sketchy. We used it.
The bottom left is a picture of what our current our outdoor storage is for, Matt, are those your storage units for athletics under there on the bleachers? Matt is our athletic director.
Those are recent. Those are prior to a year ago, we had nothing that we could even contain things in. So those are containers that we bought during COVID that we've moved over here and put under the bleachers. The idea being we can lock a baseball program up or a lacrosse program, but they are a temporary solution that's probably well past their sell-by date.
Yeah.
Right now there's no storage other than this.
There's the garage.
Matt has one room here at MHS.
You do well.
We can debate that. But it's not a place where you could put big equipment because it's upstairs and it's not accessible. And then there's just another picture of the dirt. So why, that's okay, keep going. So why a track? I'm going to ask Jason to help me out here as well. Jason Gingold, who of course is our principal at MHS. I'll start just by saying I've been here now for 5 years. The MHS campus is used by our entire community 360 days a year. A new track will add another aspect for that community benefit. I arrive at school at 6:30 in the morning, and there are people on our campus using our facilities at that time, even in the dark. It's used until I leave at night, which is typically between 5 and 6:30. So it's still being used by not just our athletes, but by our community all the time, every day. This project will have no impact on taxes, zero impact on taxes. It is money that is in the savings account. It will not increase the taxes in any way, shape, or form. And should the board decide to move forward with the 400 in addition tonight, we will still be significantly over the 2% threshold for the fund balance that is written in policy, sorry. That money is available now. We can get started. We have gotten started on some project things. We can do that. And all of our other infrastructure needs that our incredible facilities manager and administrative staff over the last few years, it's been accounted for in all the other things that we spoke about earlier. Could we do perhaps some more innovative things? Maybe. If we put our brains together, we'd have to really think about what that means. It also means staffing. It also means like when you make some decisions that are completely different in programs, it means a lot of other things as well. So we need time for that. The kids have done such a great job at talking about how it's a low cost sport for families, and it's fostering community and team, which our presentation earlier. One significant thing that we have is community loss, and anything we can do to increase community is a positive thing for our kids. It also builds lifelong mentalities. I did skip a bullet because I want Jason to talk about that more. I think quality facilities really demonstrates what Jim spoke about earlier to our community and our students, that they matter, and that future students, that we care and invest in our schools. And we have a laser-like focus on learning and social emotional learning. We do. And we're learning a lot, and we have a lot of room to grow there. And we have systems in place. We have human resources in place right now that we haven't had before. And we're moving in the right direction, as evidenced by the data that the board was presented with tonight. And I'll let Jason finish this up here with the research that is quite clear on what co-curriculars do for kids.
Hi, everybody.
Jason.
Let's see. So some of this we've heard, but let's echo some of these thoughts. Students who engage in extracurricular activities graduate at a higher rate, decrease in incarceration rates, build structures for mental health support, decrease addiction, as Jim spoke to earlier, promote leadership and community. And I think Noah, way back there, I know, spoke of that earlier tonight. In the school year 21-22, Montpelier High School served 125 students in the spring outside on that track field, 87 in the winter. And this fall, we have 155 students using that area. And that's just the high school, not to mention Nathan's program in the middle school. Replacing the track, as we're learning about, is a potential one-time cost, right? There might be summer maintenance fees, but comparably, it's a one-time cost compared to, we heard a lot about from Peggy Sue and Jess today about social emotional learning and increasing our staff. But as we know, every time we increase our staff, that also has a budget effect and could also increase the budget in years to come, which then could also have a riffing effect or a budget challenge effect, right? So maybe a one-time cost now to increase social emotional wellness versus a staffing increase, which may not be manageable later. We also know that there is a hiring shortage that you heard about, not only here in the district, but also in the state of Vermont. I happened to take a quick look at School Spring, and there are 31 open therapist positions in schools across the state and over 50 IA positions open across the state. And I didn't look at special educators, sorry. So overall, the track can help alleviate some of those concerns and would just benefit our whole community, not just the high school community as well. Thank you.
Questions for Jason or Libby?
Or any of us.
Mostly, yeah,
Andrew,
any of us,
Christina.
Andrew? Yeah.
Andrew, I asked these during the, thanks for still being here. And thank you very much for that presentation. That was very helpful. And once again, just underscores what how great, the great hands that our district is in. I asked these during the facilities committee, and I wanted to just ask them again tonight for the benefit of everybody else who's here. The numbers that we saw about a month ago, the construction cost is 1.4 alone. Can you break down what goes into that construction cost a little bit more for us?
Yeah, it was a comprehensive cost estimate that took into account the stripping of the track and soils and storing it, and stormwater mitigations you have to do during construction. The sub base, it was a full cost estimate, as well as including in there, Matt helped me out with some information on equipment for the track, and there was a question about that. Does this include the mats and the hurdles and things like that? We put that number in there. It also includes a 10% contingency, design contingency. There's also fees in there for the engineer, as well as permitting and any sort of permitting costs. The cost of the engineers preparing permits, and then permitting costs that we would have on top of that.
And then if the board were to vote yes, what's the process from there? And at what point, other points would the board, and then by that, and also the community, have a chance to be engaged in the process?
At this point, what we would do is, if there was a go ahead today, I would contact our engineers and tell them that we've got to go. We would redefine the scope, because we talked about lights and concessions and things like that. So we'd redefine the scope a little bit with them to work out the fee. They would get working on a design, bring it to a schematic design level that would sit down with Matt Link, the athletic director, as well as anyone he thinks that would be worth bringing in to talk about, what event's going to go where and what are we going to do. And we would flesh that plan out. We would then would let the engineers work on that again. We bring it to the next higher level. We would present it to the board just so everybody can nod their heads and say, yep, we understand what you're doing. We would probably then get that drawing cost estimated, so that we knew before going into bidding whether we were on track or not. Depending on what happened with that cost estimate, we would make some decisions. They would be, as this is going along, they would be working with the state agencies with regarding to permitting. And early on, they would send it over there to get a little initial conversation going, making sure there's no red flags. We would shoot to probably try to go out to bid. The bid environment's a little different right now. We won't waste too much time talking about that, but it's a little bit different. But we would shoot for, I would hope, sort of a March bid, put it out to bid in sometime in March. And having not talked too much with Matt Link about this, but I think construction wise, we would wait until school got out, just because we can't really have trucks and the parking going on. They would build the road, essentially doing as little, touching as little of the actual field as possible. We'd have to do a little grading around it, but getting the construction done before the start of school, so that soccer season would not be interfered with. The track would the road would cure over the winter, because they need 30 days between paving and putting on the coating, the track surface. And then we would work with regards to the laying on of the surface. That really we would have to, that would be dependent on weather and where we are with regards to, how long does it have to set up before someone can walk across it? Do we try to sneak it in so we can get one event in the school year, or do we say, all right, we'll work with what we got, and then we'll do the surfacing in the summer year, during the summer, when we don't have to worry about the lacrosse team running across it or anything like that while it's still green. So it's going to be, I think you will learn from U32. U32 had a vision of when they redid their track of getting it, and they ran out of summer. And that's why they had to redo it they had to do it in the spring, do their actually coating in the spring, if I understand that story correctly. So that's the general layout of it.
And then going into the bid part is when we would put out the RFP that the board would approve and the community would see. Is that when that happens?
No, it would be a bid package. It would be a set of drawings and a set of specifications. We would, on a project this size, we would pre-qualify bidders. I would put out a a pre-qualification statement that says, we're going to be having this project, and if you want to be considered for it, show past projects so that you're bondable, all those sorts of things. From there, we would say, these companies can do it. We're comfortable. If they win the bid, we will be happy to work with them. These other ones, they're not bondable. They haven't done something similar. They've never worked on a school project. They've never done a track. Maybe we don't want to work with them. We'll have that definition of who's we're going to allow work on as part of that pre-qualification process. So we'll have a group of pre-qualified bidders come March, and this is all tentative, because it used to be you wanted to be the first one on people's construction list. You right after the new year, you want to be the first project. People say, okay, I got my summer work lined up. Road construction, stuff like this, no one's going to bid 6 months out. No one's going to commit to the costs with the economy. Now, in 3 months, is that going to change? I don't think in 3 months that's going to change much. I think I would anecdotally, EFWall was bidding on a project at UVM. They got a 1-day guarantee on their stainless steel for their headers. So their supplier said this quote is good for 1 day. It's not like that anymore. That was height of COVID, but we're still. It used to be 30 days or 60 days. It's much shorter now.
Just because I don't want any more misinformation to be said, you use the word bondable. What does that mean? Because you're not talking about going out and getting a bond.
No, that means that we don't have to. We can request it. We will pay for it. But basically, we say to a contractor, we're going to award this contract. You will give us a bond that says, this is $1 million project. If for some reason I don't start, I don't complete, I don't do whatever, there's $1 million. It's an insurance policy. It's an agreement. It's an insurance policy. Generally, if you've pre-qualified, you look at these, you know who they are, you know they're not going anywhere. Last thing in the world they want to do is have, default on a school project. Again, it's a good qualifier because if they are bondable, that means there's a company that says, yeah, you're not going to go out of business. You're not going to default on this project. So almost the fact that you can get a bond is almost as good as getting a bond. And again, we'll pay for it. If we want a bond, we'll pay 1.5% of the project cost to get it.
So that was very helpful. What I was trying to figure out was where the other points in the process moving forward, the board and the community would be engaged in the process.
Well, again, I think that really, if we know what it is, we know it's a track project. Now it's really working with the athletic director and the facilities people to see what that looks like. Typically, the community has entrusted you to represent them. Right. And so we've hired an engineering firm. We don't want your input on where the hurdles are going to be stored. But we will present you when we get a plan that we're all pretty comfortable with and Matt Link is comfortable with. We will show it to you. So if someone says, hey, where are they storing the hurdles? You can say, I saw that and they're going to store them in this shed. And they say, how many? You say, I don't know how many, but I've been assured that there's going to be an appropriate amount of storage for those sorts of things. So I think just as a matter of course, we would show you the plans as you'd like to see it. It's a big project. We'd like to see it, but feedback and interest, I think that would be relatively minimal. I think that's what the building and we would certainly present to the building and energy group a little more often, just to say, this is where we're at, keep you an update. Again, that sort of seems like the role of that committee.
So is that where the adaptability conversation?
We will go through and questions like that. We will reach out. We're not going to do this behind closed doors, but we're not going to do it here. So if there is questions about that, things people would like to see, feel free to contact me and we talk about those things.
So in terms of that equity piece of it around like having a adaptability be included in that conversation, is that, I'm just trying to make sure that happens.
I think that
we can't build something that's not accessible. That is not, we're not allowed to do that.
Part of that line item is a paved ADA sidewalk from the parking lot to the track and the concession and the bleachers.
Well, it's not about access, but adaptability to students with disabilities who are in a wheelchair, who are amputees, who are who have different texture around the way the tracks are built. I was doing a little research about that. So
Please share any thoughts you have.
Okay.
And just to be clear, we do not have an accessible track now. Like that is not accessible or safe for a student with any, or a person with any kind of physical disability.
I have some overall questions.
From both. So the question around the tax benefit, just want to go back because we're saying it's not a tax increase, but we could choose that we're going to put this in the general budget. We could choose. I just want to make sure that we are clear. That is a choice too, that we could say people are hurting because people are hurting. And as you want people to come, people are leaving because they can't afford our towns. So just like that is another like thought, right? Like we could say, hey, we're going to put 1.2 million as part of the general budget, which is going to decrease taxes. So doesn't have a tax benefit, just for transparency purposes. That's not what I'm offering, but I just want to be clear that that is what I'm understanding, that we could take this money and put it as part of the general budget that is coming out.
Create a savings, but the cost of the track will not cost taxpayers money.
Exactly. I just want to be clear and transparent with that.
We could also
that statement.
pare down our budget for a tax benefit as well.
And I think those are my questions. Oh, the other one is around the hiring shortages and the thought that we could use this money to grow our own, right? Like there is some school districts thinking about growing our own paras, growing our own, paras to become special educators or teachers, and putting some funds around that idea that, yes, we don't have staff and we have some interventions that we could see myself. That we could grow our own program and grow our own initiatives about teaching, and that could be also part of that. So that just brings me to that conversation around like the different purposes we could do that. So that was like just that comment that I had around thinking of teaching shortages and also thinking about our assets that we have here in our district.
It's not really a question, I guess. But that conversation did come up in the finance committee, and the structures are already here to build paras and IAs. It's happened, and there are already structures to do that. I don't think it needs $2 million to do that at all.
Why not? But yes.
Continue to have conversations after tonight, whether we vote on it or not.
I mean, from the perspective of Roxbury, I think it's hard for kids to. It's a challenge to make and build and sustain friendships once kids get to MSMS. Working on connecting the elementary schools early and often is something that I think we're all thinking about. I'm certainly working on that. Pen pals between families, whatever we can do to build relationships. A large track program would be a huge benefit to Roxbury kids to stay after school and be with their friends and be part of the program, to take advantage of the late bus that we have. And I've heard nothing but support from Roxbury. I mean, what we see from the presentation, our academics are doing pretty well. What we're missing is community and social emotional loss. All of this stuff is about social emotional community. I have Avery telling me that, or all of us, that, he found a group of boys that make him a better human being every day. That's like I'm like, I was having a hard time listening to that. That was really powerful. You know, another kid saying that they transferred here to be part of the track team because of the community that track team has established. I mean, when you talk about community, we talked about how loud the cheers were for the soccer team out there. It's not just the players and the athletes, it's the friends that come and support them, that get together for events to support their friends and that's where community gets built. That's what being in middle school and being in high school is all about. I mean, it's not necessarily that you're the star, it's that you can cheer for, you know, you and your crew can cheer for whoever it is that's the star. I don't know. I just think the benefits of this is so great, and the damage that could be done if we prolong this process, it could ruin it. I think we walk into a very, very sort of dangerous place if we prolong this process further. I'd like to make a motion to have a vote. If I can, I don't know.
Should we-
You definitely.
I felt like there was sort of another motion that had been made, but just not formally. And I just want to make sure that Mia, if you want to proceed with that motion. Okay.
I think what you will need to do is actually make a motion to.
Can I? Yeah. I'd like to make a motion to commit the additional $400,000 so that the process can begin. Did I just do it? Okay.
I'll second that.
Discussion?
Well, I'm gonna say that I would have liked to hear from Libby and all of them about specifically more priorities of how you would use this, like, and give us a chance to think through the holistic picture around all the pieces. I think, again, like, I reread the infrastructure report. I reread some of the recommendations that Andrew has in that report, including, today I come with disability in mind for a lot of reasons, but I'm thinking a lot about accessibility and people in wheelchairs, and that's what I'm bringing into today with me. So bear with me that I really just want to make this good when I make this decision 7 years from now, who's coming to be everywhere in our school system. So, like, thinking of Roxbury and rereading the piece around having a wheelchair access for people in the town hall, and for people who are having community events there, and just rereading that, I was like, oh, we should really prioritize having an accessibility piece around the Roxbury Town Hall where community events happen. And so I would have loved for this process to be conversations around the actuality versus this binary, you are for the track or not. And that is sad. It's sad to me that that is what happened, right? Like, that it was a binary between, am I voting for the track or am I not? So that is the discussion I am having right now.
I just wanted to remember that Roxbury is accessible for people in wheelchairs in the town hall, just not directly through the front door. It is accessible.
Through the ceremonial front door, through the historic ceremonial.
Which does not get open often.
Yeah, and I want to say, I mean, I definitely acknowledge that this process could have been far better, and I think it should have been far better. I think we should learn from it. I also feel that the strong consensus on the board is that this is a project that we're going to approve, and I think further process is likely to confuse it and also put up, I think, a false choice. I also do not think this is a binary choice. I think that a lot of the priorities that have been spoken to tonight and spoken to the community are things that we are working on and we want to work on, and we want to continue to have those conversations. This is not the track or all these other things that Amanda and Mia and Emma and everyone else here has brought in as priorities. And, Kristen and, the needs in Roxbury that Red has talked about. these are all continuing conversations we can have and things that we need to continue to work on and things that can be funded from other sources and things that, as Libby has stated, are being addressed and thought of now. This is not a binary choice. And I think that has been kind of falsely teed up in the community. And I really feel that that is one of the things we need to do. And while we may not have, this is, we're always a constant process. I think we definitely need to educate the community on, if the board does vote affirmatively as to why we did it and why this makes sense and why those other priorities are continuing to get our attention, are continuing to be things that we care about and things that we have, resources and we'll have continuing resources to fund, because, a school is an organic system. We keep fixing things, we keep making it better, we keep making investments, we keep doing things for our kids. And I feel tonight is an opportunity to do one wonderful thing for our kids, a needed thing for our kids, I think a thing that needs to get done. But we need to do lots of other things too. And this is a step along the way. It's not the end of anything. It's not taking anything off the table. It's a great thing we're doing, and we're going to continue to do great things.
As the parliamentarian, I think if we have a motion that was seconded, we have to withdraw it. Otherwise, it's like an open question, right?
I didn't really make.
You
a
didn't?
motion.
Okay.
I didn't really.
Okay.
make a motion.
Okay. So
But thank you. Keeping us in line.
Emma.
I think that we have a real opportunity. I'm excited to see that we have another $1 million in the fund balance, that we have an opportunity there to engage the community that is already now paying attention and engaged on this topic. And we can bring them in for a really solid process moving forward that can be like a model of best practice of how we allocate fund balances in the future. And I think it's a good amount of money to address some of the major concerns that I heard in emails that haven't already been addressed with other funding sources. Because most of the things that I heard people in the community asking us to use the fund balances for instead of the track were things that were already being addressed. But there were a couple of things that were really good suggestions that now we have this other $1 million to create a process around.
So one last thing because I forgot is that I just want to thank everybody that did send your comments. I think 50%, it was very close. I got about 96, 97 folks that responded to a survey I put up in Front Porch Forum. It's really 50-50. Some of the responders already had sent emails or were here present. Others were new. And I feel like a lot of the concerns were around process, transparency, which is also one of the, top points in the visionary process that we did. There was a lot of misinformation around the track field. So some of that around the turf, there was a lot of, don't vote on it because of the turf. So I think that one thing we could do is that I'm going to respond to the 97 people that email me in that survey about my decision in this meeting. But I think that we should learn from that process that to see Front Porch Forum as a way to engage. It's the only way I can engage because I'm not on Facebook or social media. And I try to not be in email so much. So I think that it's important that we do not take for granted our elderly and that we don't take for granted those who don't have kids in our districts and that we do engage with them. And I think not necessarily so much for the process, we've had plenty of opportunities we are the source of the information. And if we don't put that information outwards, somebody else will. And we need to be very clear, concise, and we need to all be on the same page about what that information is. Again, the danger of the single story piece. So I think there is still a lot of misinformation, and it wouldn't hurt to do a public session about here's all the misinformation we hear, here's all of it, in addition to this. People are busy. They don't have time to sit in school board meetings or listen to the videos for 3 hours. And I don't expect them to. So I won't say anything.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you, everyone. This was quite a process. An imperfect one. Cut along. Should we?
First quarter.
First quarter financial report. Yeah. Yes. Christina?
Christina, take the hot seat.
Yeah.
We're gonna do the first quarter report.
Thank you all for coming and staying so much.
Yes, thank you, everyone.
Really helpful.
Yeah.
No, we're not adjourned.
Robert's not here.
But you don't have to.
Okay. I will also be there.
Doors and stuff like
All
that.
right. Hopefully this will be quick.
I'll check in with them.
I can set the alarm. It's fine.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Christina. I know it's been.
Good night. No. Do I?
Committee has kind of taken the lead of like, what were finance committee has taken the lead as to what were the highlights, and Christina's here to answer any questions from the rest of the board who did not have the in-depth overview of the finance committee. So I'm going to nominate Aniket to give some highlights.
Oh, I second that nomination.
Okay. Let's see. We had a good finance committee meeting. A few highlights. We are overall, we are I don't know, over budget's the right word, but we are over our average spending for the first quarter. A few things that were highlighted. We have 5 or 4 out of district placements, unexpected high number of those, and that's contributing to a major portion of it. We have the buildings and grounds. There's a big concern about fuel costs. In general, the cost of fuel is going up, so $50,000 to $70,000 over there. That may be over the budgeted amount. We have a couple of other things which are the vacancies that Libby and others talked about. So that may bring down, but we might fill them. But that's something that we'll continue to monitor as far as the budgets and spending is concerned. We talked at length about the fund balance, or Libby did, about fund balance and how it's allocated. So I don't think we need to go into that again, unless there are specific questions. As far as revenues, we have pretty much everything on as expected, and there isn't anything that jumped out to me that was out of alignment as far as the revenue sources are concerned. No concerns or nothing that out of ordinary for me. A few highlights that are usual. The food service information are we want to run that as a business, but there are challenges in doing that. So every year we allocate $110,000 or about $100,000 that we will transfer to make up for the deficit, and we've done that this year as well. The other funding sources, everything is just as per expectations, and same goes for long-term debt. There's nothing really on that page that jumped out to me, unless I'm missing something. That's pretty much it. What did I miss, Jill?
Well, I think it reflects some of the same things we saw in the presentation from about special education and social emotional learning, right? Like the out of placement is higher than expected, and we would probably expect to see that. And then there's other places where the budget is also seeing sort of the impacts of that. So yeah, I think you covered it. And a lot of the expenditures are front loaded. A lot of the trainings and purchases and things do happen in the first quarter. So that can also account for it being a little higher this quarter. Continue to calibrate and watch it as the quarters come by.
Yeah, and there was a comment or question I had that I think Christina made that comment that as Jill mentioned, a lot of things in here are high because they're front loaded. But one of the comment I made was then the 2-year average, shouldn't that reflect if it's the front loaded, if it's a common thing that we're front loading it every year, shouldn't the 2-year average catch that? But the reasoning behind that is last 2 years haven't been normal. They haven't been, we were affected by COVID. And so a lot of things didn't get front loaded because a lot of things didn't happen. So that's why the 2-year average is a little skewed over there.
In those out of district placements, there are a handful of kiddos that really had some serious behavioral challenges. And so it was sort of agreed upon with the families and the district that they would get better services in a different site. And part of Libby's response to that is investing in the Thrive space, correct?
Rise, shine,
Rise,
thrive, yeah.
Rise, shine, and thrive. Because if we can create better spaces, which we're working on, then we'll be better able to serve kids that have more sort of impactful behavioral, behavioral disturbances, or I don't know how I want to say that, but kids that are struggling in a way that disrupts everything around them. They'll have better spaces to be better
space to provide those services in a way that maintains somebody's dignity.
Yeah, and in my experience, if somebody's in crisis, the best thing to do is give them a safe space to go through that process and not try to stop it. Just allow it to happen in a safe way.
Did I read or did I make this up? A settlement agreement in there in the financial report?
Yeah, it's a confidential settlement agreement that's happened for the past 4 years.
Yeah, it's been there.
Yeah, it's
This
been
is
there
the
for a
last
while.
year.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's not like a new lawsuit or anything?
No.
I'm sorry?
It's not like a new lawsuit or
Oh,
anything?
no. It's the last
We would
year.
know that, right?
If it were a
If there was a
lawsuit,
lawsuit, like settlements or no?
in a confidential manner, yes.
So the higher number of out of district placements for 504, is that wedge of the pie we were seeing from Peggy Sue? That's the not at MRPS. That's those.
It could be. It could be. But it's not that pie or that wedge wouldn't be just totally 504s necessarily either. In the exchange program, there's students who are on IEPs who are in the exchange program with U32.
Got it. Right. That's right. Okay.
And there's kids with 504s who are in the exchange program, and they're, so it could be, yes.
Uh-huh. And then I also noted the anticipation that fuel costs will be higher by a significant amount. Is that the kind of thing that, we have in the fund balance? We have that $400,000 sitting there ready to go as a transfer. Is that the kind of thing that we would use that for?
We haven't put it as a set aside yet because we haven't locked into any contract, but Andrew and I are meeting weekly to keep on top of this. So once we know what we're going to end up spending, it also comes down to, springtime. Are our tanks empty? Can we get by? Do we need to fill them up, in March, April? So it will actually be a third quarter decision to see what we end up spending.
Sorry, I'm laughing because I just paid my oil and I was like, I just filled my tank and it was triple than what I actually paid.
I think that the part of the sort of feeling of the problem with the process that we had is that we're also new. because the more I see stuff, the more I remember how it connects to this and that, and this and all these things are very much connected, and it doesn't necessarily feel that way in the moment. And it's taking a lot of time to sort of think about how all these things string together. I don't think, I know that the process didn't go as we might have hoped, but I think that we're doing a really good job. I mean, I hope that other people feel that way. It just is, it's so much information. It's really hard to wrap my head around it. And I'm in it now for more than a year, and all the time it's like, I'm spending this time. It's like that I saw that over there, but it looked different because it wasn't presented in the same presentation or under the same facility name or committee name or whatever. It's like, no, I mean, it's hard to wrap your head around it. So it's always going to feel clunky and imperfect.
Yeah, there's a lot of streams and tributaries coming together to kind of form the river that's this district. It is complicated and confusing.
I think mid-December, the SBA is offering a reflective process workshop. So it's worth checking out their website, but essentially kind of framing what a process would look like. Okay, this happened, it's now behind us, and now we have the opportunity to look in the rear view and really do some reflective thinking about how we can improve and refine process. So
I feel like we did that, but we didn't do anything with it. We had two processes in front of us, which we dissected, and then we didn't do anything with it. So we need to be better at that, at doing something and continuing with it.
I need to approve the facilities, the finance report.
Second.
Any discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
I say we fund all of the readings to next time.
Yeah, I feel
Unless-
comfortable with that. I don't think anyone
Well,
rightfully should have had any time to read through any of those with any fidelity. So I think that we should allow you time to do that.
I did have a question regarding the process for the first readings. Do we have to say it like in more advance or no? Did you remember we had this and we're like, oh yeah, we're supposed to do that?
We were that was about the final warning of like when we're going to be voting on it, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, adopting it.
yeah, I think when you have first readings, you want to discuss it. So you have the opportunity to say, yeah, I saw this, it didn't make sense. You explain
Yeah.
that. So.
And we've been working on that group of policies for a long time in the policy
Yeah.
committee. So it would be great to like have some fresh eyes on it. And then we're totally willing, it's on our next agenda to look at notes. So if you have notes, let us know.
Thank you, Christina.
Christina.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Wait, home?
You're gonna do it, aren't you? Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
So second,
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for putting in a lot of work on this.